Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 1: Kitchen Knife in Hand. Aunt Liu, thank you so much for the trouble these past few days. Well, I'd like to wander around on my own for a while before school starts, so soon you find me annoying. No. Look, I've been in America for a week already, and you've been busy taking care of me. The main thing is, you still have such a big hospital to run. I'm just afraid of taking up your time. I feel bad about it, HMPH little rascal, trying to play games with me? Fine, since you want to wander around on your own, then I won't accompany you tomorrow, but you have to be careful. Although America looks prosperous, it's not as good as back home after all. There are a lot of gangs and stuff, especially at night. Don't just wander around aimlessly, and don't go to those shady places. Okay, I got it. Do you have enough money on you? I heard that your mother didn't give you much for studying abroad this time. Don't worry, Aunt Liu, you know my situation. I've been able to earn my own money for a long time. That's good. Call me if you run into any trouble. I'm leaving now. Goodbye, Aunt Liu. As the twilight in the sky gradually dimmed, Liang Yue waved goodbye to the woman opposite him. Looking at Aunt Liu's enchanting figure and kind smile, he felt a burst of helplessness in his heart sigh. What is this all about? After the woman's taillights disappeared around the corner of the street, Liang Yue turned around and looked at the exquisite two-story building in front of him. His gaze subconsciously glanced to the lower left corner, and then his spirits lifted. He casually closed the iron gate and slowly strolled back into the house. Liang Yue is a transmigrator, or you could say a reincarnated person. Anyway, after he was accidentally killed by a telephone pole in his previous life, his soul transmigrated to this world, or more precisely, into his mother's womb. In this life he was in a daze until his mother carried him for 10 months and gave birth to him. 16 years have passed since then. As a result, Liang Yue, who was born in a quiet small mountain town, naturally turned his life in this world into an entertainment story. In addition to practicing piano and various ethnic musical instruments diligently, and loving to practice his voice when he had nothing to do, this guy also tentatively began to study various professional knowledge about film and television directing. Relying on the knowledge and perception of his previous life, Liang Yue had already won several regional awards at a young age until one day, Aunt Liu came to visit and brought him a suitcase of gifts from abroad. In addition to various toys and electronic products, she also brought 2 English books. One of them was called The Brief and Glorious Life of Captain America. According to Aunt Liu, this is a non-fiction biography that has been a bestseller in foreign countries for many years. Looking at Chris Evans' firm face on the novel's cover page, representing justice and courage, Liang Yue felt a chill in his heart immediately. This little brat made a difficult decision in less than 2 seconds. That is, from today on, he will practice martial arts to strengthen his body. Liang Yue was only 9 years old at the time. However, as the saying goes, the poor study literature, the rich practice martial arts. If you want to practice martial arts, you need sufficient surplus funds to support you, and he does have some experience in this area. But even so, this martial arts is not so easy to practice thanks to the accumulation of his previous life. Although he was young, he had his own small treasury, but cultivation, especially those real memory inheritances, can never be obtained with money. Moreover, the world in front of him is Marvel. Those national martial arts masters who have practiced hard for decades may not be able to withstand a cheap bullet, not to mention those superheroes flying all over the sky and aliens. As long as you are lucky enough, sometimes a tube of unknown genetic potion may instantly create a freak who is far better than others. Lifetimes of cultivation. In this way, the return rate of practicing martial arts is actually very low. But then again, Chinese martial arts are not useless. Supervillains like the Mandarin, who were born here, in addition to the 10 amazing alien rings, also cultivated a strong Zhuangguang secret technique. In addition, secret ancient lands such as Kunlun and Kamartaj also have their own unique inheritances, which are definitely powerful and effective. Therefore, as far as the path of martial arts cultivation is concerned, the inheritance of the sect is really important. After thinking about it, Liang Yue could only hope that when he grew up, he would go to Kamartaj more often. and then find an opportunity to join Guyu's sect to learn magic. At least he knew that the legendary magic city was located there. As a result, Liang Yue, who was still young, began to prepare for his own cultivation. In addition to planned physical exercise, books of Taoist and Buddhist origin were also within his scope. In his spare time, this guy would also take a watermelon knife and practice chopping like a mad dog. Unfortunately, in these years of training, the most outstanding achievement of the little brat was only to hunt a badger in the forest with his clumsy archery skills. The price Liang Yue paid for this was a fine of 500, plus criticism and education from the police, plus a beating from his mother that night. Even the wooden bow that Liang Yue spent a lot of effort to make was confiscated and destroyed on the spot. He was depressed about it for a long time. However, things soon took a turn for the better. After all, I am a transmigrator. Golden fingers may be late, but they will never be absent. After entering the house, Liang Yue simply ate a meal, took a shower, showed off his figure in front of the mirror, changed into neat sportswear, and ran to the kitchen to get a kitchen knife. Before returning to his bedroom, quietly lying on the bed, he unconsciously glanced at the lower left corner of his vision, where a string of numbers was silently jumping. 05, 3405, 3305 hours, and 32 minutes. This is an electronic clock that suddenly appeared in Liang Yue's vision about a year ago. It doesn't affect the vision itself, but it always attracts his attention. Liang Yue, who had a ghost in his heart because of the transmigration, immediately realized that this thing was very likely the countdown to the opening of his golden finger. After all, you can't just be a clock. As a result, Liang Yue, who was originally becoming more and more uneasy with the passage of time, finally breathed a sigh of relief, and his heart also gained some confidence. The reason why Liang Yue took a kitchen knife in his hand when there were only 5 minutes left in the countdown was just to be prepared for anything. After all, he doesn't know what kind of golden finger he has. Chapter 2. If you want to get rich, you must first pull up trees. What if you can't pull them up? 10, 9, 8, 7. As time ticked closer second by second, Liang Yue couldn't help but become nervous, his chest rising and falling unevenly, his mouth unconsciously starting to count down the seconds. His slightly large phoenix eyes were fixed on every change of the electronic clocking. The All Heavens hunting system is activated. After detecting that the host is in good condition and the environment is hidden, the novice mission can be officially started. May I ask if the host wants to enter the novice world immediately? Finally, when the last second of the electronic clock came to an end, a screen of light suddenly jumped out in front of Liang Yue, and a pair of eyes similar to his, but painted with blood-colored smoky makeup, appeared there, looking even more yaoya, bewitching, strange, ghastly, weird, bizarre, uncanny, devilish. Looking at these eyes, Liang Yue was immediately startled, and unconsciously felt a burst of dizziness in front of him, as if his entire mind was about to sink into it. However, he quickly recovered, pondering the system's previous words in his mind. All Heavens hunting system. I didn't expect that this would be the most troublesome kind. It feels a bit aloof. With a change of mind, the corners of Liang Yue's mouth curved into a relieved smile. But that's right, the Marvel side is a high-risk world. As a transmigrator, it would be very troublesome to survive here without some special skills. Speaking of which, this novice mission shouldn't be too difficult, right? As for the novice world, wait a minute. Looking at the pair of eyes opposite him, Liang Yue subconsciously squeezed the kitchen knife in his hand, then slipped off the bed and strode out of the bedroom. In the mirror was a slightly thin teenager, about 1.75 meters tall, with wheat-colored skin, wearing black sportswear, and short, neat hair. As the light flowed, a few rare traces of fortitude appeared on a face that still had some childishness. I'm ready, let's start. Swish. At the moment when he finished speaking, his entire person suddenly disappeared from the room. Then, there was a burst of messy clanging sounds. The kitchen knife that Liang Yue had been holding tightly in his hand, and the backpack on his back, also fell to the ground with the disappearance of their owner. With a flash of light, Liang Yue only felt a change of light and shadow in front of him, and then appeared in an unfamiliar place. This was a forest with soft light. The surrounding vegetation was lush, the trees were tall and strong, and there were also a few brightly colored small flowers scattered among the shade of the trees and green grass. A scene of prosperity. Inhale, exhale. It's a bit oxygen drunk. My whole body is numb. System, where's this? Coming to this strange place for the first time, Liang Yue vigilantly looked around, and after confirming that there was no danger, he quickly leaned back against a straight and wide tree trunk. Looking at his empty hands and back, he couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth a few times, and while feeling helpless, he could only accept the reality. Fortunately, The clothes and shoes are still there. The host's current location is the McWorld. The purpose of this novice world is survival and adaptation. The system mission has now been issued. Please check it yourself, Mick. Hearing this, Liang Yue's eyes lit up, but then he showed a look of suspicion, subconsciously looking around. And then looking at the thick trees behind him. The plants in front of him had gnarled and strong roots, even piercing out of the ground. Although the trunk was straight, the surface of the bark was also gnarled and full of wrinkles. This doesn't look like pixels at all, does it? System, is this really the McWorld? Please explore on your own. Host, okay, whatever you say. But since it's Mick, it's easy to handle. I used to play this game a lot, although I never understood the redstone technology. But if it's just about surviving here, it shouldn't be a big problem. Thinking of this, the string in Liang Yue's heart that had been a little tense finally slowly relaxed. Looking up at the sun hanging in the middle of the sky, he clenched his fists, and a hint of excitement arose in the depths of his eyes. In any case, the novice period is always crucial. As long as I can get through it safely, things will be easier in the future. And for a survival game world like Mick, collecting various materials is undoubtedly the most important thing. How does that saying go? To get rich, first chop trees. Immediately, Liang Yue's eyes shone like electricity, and he raised his iron fists and gave the tree trunk full of ravines in front of him a series of standard, crazy swings. The sounds of shouting were endless. However, after this guy outputted a dozen punches with some self-forgetfulness, his entire person suddenly froze there, his face turning blue and red, and his facial features twisting non-stop. Looking at Liang Yue's fists again, they were already all skinned, and a trace of blood was slowly flowing from the wound he saw. With a scream, Liang Yue trembled and protected his hands, slowly squatting down on the ground for a time. Sweat grew between his brows, and his teeth were gnashing. Damn it. Damn. After silently howling and enduring for a few minutes, Liang Yue slowly regained his sanity and gradually calmed down. System, what's going on? System, get out here. I promise I won't beat you to death. Liang Yue called for a long time, but he never got a response. The burning pain in his fists, but a belly of anger nowhere to vent. This feeling of being repressed, stifled, suffocated, disgruntled, and annoyance almost made him want to jump and curse. However, soon, Liang Yue's heart sank, and he secretly thought of a certain possibility. The string behind his head that had been relaxed could not help but tighten again with a thought. He concentrated on analyzing the situation in front of him. This should, probably, not be an accident. Chopping trees is a function in the game. Not being able to chop trees means I can't use the functions in the game. Could it be that I have come to this world as a natural person, and I don't have the abilities of an game character? Without the abilities of the game character, I can't collect various materials, and I can't make various tools, weapons, and armor. The heaven-defying creation module and Mick can't be used either. Thinking of this, Liang Yue's face suddenly stiffened, and then he hesitantly opened his mouth and said, "Inventory, come out." Sure enough, there's nothing. How am I supposed to play this? You must know that the Mick in front of you is not a peaceful world. In addition to various beasts and jackals, once the sun goes down, all kinds of monsters will spawn like zombies, creepers, skeleton archers, spider monsters, slimes, witches, little blacks, and so on. Moreover, these monsters will randomly refresh around the character after dark, almost impossible to defend against. If it were a game character, he could use various function settings to fight them. Now Liang Yue is just an unarmed natural person, a pure newbie. How is he supposed to play? Is this really a novice world? Chapter 3 Newbie Gift Box. Is this really a newbie world? At least give me a way out. Leaning slowly against a big tree, with the pressure of survival increasing dramatically, Liang Yue's thoughts began to flow quickly. Various ideas and survival methods arose in his mind, only to be constantly rejected for a time. As his energy became highly concentrated, the pain in his fist quietly faded away. After a while, Liang Yue, who had completely calmed down, finally formulated a barely feasible survival plan based on his understanding of this game world. Right, the system seemed to have mentioned something about tasks before. As soon as this thought arose in his mind, a light screen panel immediately popped out silently. There are 3 tasks, 1 main task, and 2 side tasks. Liang Yue was now touching his chin with one hand, and slowly moving his fingers with the other. The tearing pain constantly stimulated his nerves, and as he read the task information, his face began to look unsightly. Main task, survival task requirement, successfully survive for 1 month in the McWorld. Task reward, 300 points, the system store will be opened, failure will result in death. Side Task 1. A small test of skill task requirement. Hunt 5 kinds of hostile creatures, no less than 10 of each kind. Task reward. 100 points. Preliminary integration of McWorld rules. Task failure will result in a deduction of 100 points. Side Task 2. Shelter task requirement. Establish a safe and reliable shelter, requiring a bed, crafting table, furnace, map, and a self-sufficient plantation with no less than 3 kinds of crops. Task reward. 100 points. A stronghold token. Task failure will result in a deduction of 100 points. This preliminary integration of McWorld rules, wouldn't it mean I'll have the abilities of a game character? Otherwise, it seems that Side Task 2 won't be completed, so, isn't the system forcing me to do hunting tasks? Looking at the task information in front of him, Liang Yue immediately felt a stomach ache and was filled with inner conflict. Frankly speaking, if it were in a game, completing this task wouldn't be too difficult. After all, getting hit wouldn't hurt, you could recover health by eating something, and even if you died, you could respawn. Under this premise, even if he had to face monsters head-on with his fists, the chances of winning would be quite high. But now Liang Yue is facing a real world. What to do? Make a trap to kill them? Maybe him. Just as this guy was troubled in his heart and muttering to himself, his gaze suddenly noticed another option besides the task panel on the side of the light screen. Character attributes? Let's take a look. With a thought from Liang Yue, the light screen immediately switched to another panel. Liang Yue strength. 8, standard is 10, agility. 11 constitution. 15 intelligence. 18 bloodline, human, sealed, talent, vigorous, affinity cultivation method, none skills. Language proficiency, system granted, abilities, simple tool making, wooden bow. This attribute panel is a bit rudimentary. Bloodline. Sealed? What does this mean? Am I not human? Looking at the remark in the parentheses, Liang Yue couldn't help but scratch his head, his mind filled with question marks. Language proficiency is easy to understand. After all, I'm going to hunt in all worlds, so I can't possibly have to learn to speak again every time I go to a new place. But this bloodline, could it also be granted by the system? Forget it. I won't think about this for now, but system, since I'm still a newbie, shouldn't you give me some benefits for arriving here, like a newbie gift box or something? After looking at the character panel in front of him again and confirming that nothing was missing, Liang Yue suddenly had a thought and seemingly casually touched his injured fist, saying in his heart unexpectedly, the system was very direct this time. Accompanied by a pleasant notification sound, a simple wooden box immediately popped up on the light screen in front of him. Ling. Obtained a newbie gift box. Upon seeing this, Liang Yue immediately clenched his fist, his face showing some excitement, and impatiently said, "Nice. I knew it." Open the box. Then, with a creak, the lid of the wooden box flipped open, and after a flash of white light, 2 items immediately fell out from inside. Ding. Obtained a multiverse newbie weapon crate, and a common leather backpack. The dark brown leather backpack fell to the ground with a thud, while the dusty and unadorned weapon crate was still hanging on the light screen. Quickly picking up the brown leather backpack in front of him, Liang Yue carefully checked it with a hint of hope in his heart, but his face immediately fell, and he said dejectedly, "Damn, this thing is really just a bag? I thought it would be a space backpack or something." Although he was a little disappointed, Liang Yue obviously knew that now was not the time for him to complain. Although the lush forest with its blooming flowers was beautiful, many dangers lurked in the shadows behind the flowers. According to his previous plan, the most correct choice was to find a hidden and sturdy place to stay as soon as possible. It's best to leave this forest as soon as possible and open the weapon crate. As Liang Yue's words fell, the crate on the light screen in front of him immediately began to shake violently, and cracks slowly covered the body of the crate, with a shining light shining through the limited gaps. Liang Yue could glimpse the shapes of various weapons that were constantly changing inside. There were modern firearms and simple cold weapons, and various weapons disappeared in the blink of an eye. This thing, why does it look so much like a certain game from my previous life? Liang Yue, who was flashed in the eyes, subconsciously blocked his palm in front of him, but his mind was a little distracted at this moment. The weapon crate in front of him seemed unable to withstand the destruction any longer, and shattered into a pile of fine rubble. A white object fell out of the light screen with a thudding. "Congratulations, host, you have drawn a low-level blue weapon, ordinary hand crossbow. This weapon comes from the DNF World Hand Crossbow." DNF. Hand crossbow. Looking at the hand crossbow that was quietly lying on the ground in front of him, Liang Yue's face was suddenly stunned, and then his eyes lit up, and a hint of excitement flashed in his mind. He quickly held it in his hand. The shape of this hand crossbow was a bit simple, and it felt light in the hand. It was the kind of product that wouldn't make people look at it more than once even if it was placed on the counter. However, Liang Yue didn't dare to underestimate it at this time, and carefully looked at it. Ordinary hand crossbow, top grade, blue, advanced weapon, physical attack +10, magical attack +10, independent attack +8, strength +3, intelligence +1, durability 30/30, quickly retrieve weapon, no level restrictions. This is just an ordinary children's toy. It's difficult to hunt even a goblin with it. Equipment from the game world. No level restriction. Speaking of which, with such low usage requirements, I should be able to use it, right? And, since it's a game equipment, shouldn't the ammunition be unlimited? With the help of the system, after carefully checking the information attributes of this weapon, Liang Yue couldn't wait to hold it tightly in his hand. Then, with a trace of trepidation in his heart, he pulled the trigger. It arose 10 meters away. With a soft pop sound, an arrow suddenly appeared out of thin air, as if it had generated itself, and shot out from the hand crossbow accompanied by a soft bowstring sound. The arrow drew an inconspicuous arc in the air, and finally flew over the rose and plunged into the tree trunk. Then, with a thud sound, it softly fell to the ground. This power doesn't seem to be very good, and the aim is a bit strange. Upon seeing this, Liang Yue immediately commented in his heart, but at this moment, he couldn't care about these things for the time being, and pulled the trigger again. Pop! Another bowstring sound rang out, and the arrow appeared out of thin air again, and then suddenly shot out with a swoosh. It once again crossed over the rose and finally stuck in the tree trunk. Pop pop, double shot, pop pop pop, 3 arrows fired at the same time. This hand crossbow, is it really unlimited ammo? Looking at the seemingly unremarkable gray object in his hand, Liang Yue couldn't help but widen his eyes, his face full of surprise and curiosity. Then, this guy fired arrows like rain again, as if he was venting, without stopping. The sound of the bowstring pop 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 was endless. It wasn't until the rose opposite was shot and shattered that he stopped with satisfaction. The power of this hand crossbow doesn't seem to be very strong, but 10 points of attack power is barely enough in this mech world. It's a pity that the attack range of this equipment is a bit poor, and the accuracy is not very good either. The previous frenzy of random shooting was naturally not just a vent. After a period of shooting practice, Liang Yue basically figured out some of the characteristics of this equipment in his hand. For example, the effective range of this hand crossbow is almost only within 10 meters, which is simply unbearable. Any further and the power will drop drastically, and in the end, it may not even be able to penetrate wood. Also, the accuracy of this game equipment is indeed not very good. The trajectory is scattered, the precision is insufficient, and the landing point is difficult to control. You can only make some relatively general position judgments. This is still under the premise that Liang Yue had previously practiced archery and had some field combat experience. Otherwise, the effect would probably be even worse, but I can't ask for too much. It's already very good to get this weapon now, and it's a ranged weapon. With it, as long as I'm more careful, it shouldn't be a big problem to protect myself. Liang Yue combined his understanding of this game and quickly analyzed his situation after obtaining this hand crossbow. At this moment, his quietly suspended heart was finally put back down. Now the most important thing should be to quickly find a hidden foothold, otherwise when night comes hell. Chapter 4, First Encounter with Zombies. Slightly deviating from the survival rules in reality, in the current Minecraft world, food and water are important, but they are not the primary elements compared to a stable and reliable shelter. The reason is simple. After the sun sets, if the player's surroundings lack sufficient light as a barrier, various monsters will randomly spawn in some dark corners. Melee, ranged, self-destructing, teleporting monsters, and so on, are numerous, and the quantity is unlimited. If Liang Yue possessed the abilities of a game character instead of just being a natural person, he would naturally have the confidence to survive using his previous gaming experience, and even live well. However, things are not going smoothly now. The system obviously doesn't intend to let him pass easily. Therefore, for safety's sake, Liang Yue feels that he should first lie low for a while, otherwise zombies are easy to deal with. But if I encounter a skeleton archer, Liang Yue, who was currently climbing a tree while holding a hand crossbow, couldn't help but recall the performance of that monster in the game, and his heart suddenly felt a burst of emptiness. For example, in ancient China, there was a famous general known for his archery skills. One day, he was out hunting when suddenly a gust of wind rose, and the roar of a tiger echoed in his ears. The general thought it was a tiger. Greatly alarmed, he quickly drew his bow and shot 3 arrows in the direction of the tiger's roar. After the wind subsided, the general thought he had killed the tiger. He quickly turned over the grass to check, only to find that the so-called tiger was actually a rock that resembled a tiger. The 3 arrows he had just shot had all penetrated into the rock, according to records. Afterwards, when the general wanted to practice archery on the stone again, he could no longer reach the level of shooting the tiger at that time. Later generations often cite this story to express that in times of crisis, people often burst out with stronger strength and potential than before to help themselves overcome difficulties. But the reason why Liang Yue suddenly thought of this legend in his heart was because he was reminded of those seemingly inconspicuous skeleton archers in the game that can shoot almost every arrow into a stone, and their archery is incredibly accurate. If I get hit by one, even if I don't die, I'll probably be crippled on the spot, right? Thinking of this, Liang Yue suddenly shivered. The courage that had arisen in his heart due to suddenly obtaining ranged equipment was unconsciously reduced by 30%. Standing on the high treetop, facing the bright sunshine and gentle breeze, Liang Yue's mood was somewhat heavy, and his gaze towards the surroundings was mixed with a bit of vigilance. An endless sea of trees. Tisk, this is not a good place. The denser the forest, the more shadows there are. When the time comes, there seem to be a few mountains over there. Using his hand to create a shade on his forehead, Liang Yue squinted his eyes, exerted his eyesight, and tried his best to look towards one end of the forest. He saw that at the end of his vision, under the cover of light and shadow and thin mist, there seemed to be a continuous range of mountains rising and falling, hazy and magnificent, but also seemingly with hidden dangers lurking. According to the game experience of my previous life, in the mountains, there are mostly caves or other places on the mountainside. Right? If I'm lucky, maybe I can find a small cave generated on a cliff when the time comes. Just drill inside. Looking at the hazy scene in the distance, Liang Yue couldn't help but fall into self-fantasy for a while. After a long while, he slowly came back to his senses, his mind gradually cooled down, and then he shook his head vigorously, throwing psychological thoughts out of his mind. Forget it, as the saying goes, looking at a mountain makes a horse die. If I really rely on finding a way out in the mountains, who knows what kind of trouble will arise. Besides, the purpose of my coming to this newbie world is to adapt. Survival is only the most basic condition. If I can't even handle this, how can I gain a foothold in Marvel, and even the myriad worlds? I must not be psychological. Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but turn around and look at the endless sea of trees again, bit his teeth, and finally sighed softly. Then, he turned over and climbed down the tree, walking towards the depths of the dense forest. Alice. It seems that I am just a hard-working person. Now that he had made a decision, Liang Yue would naturally not hesitate any longer. Although he seemed to be only 16 years old at this time, the wisdom bonus from his previous life was not for nothing. Liang Yue, who is familiar with the background of this world, will certainly not be confused by the natural scenery in front of him. While walking, his eyes are wide open, constantly scanning the surroundings, especially those dark corners. His ears are even perked up high, trying to listen to all the sounds around him. About 15 minutes later, when Liang Yue climbed over a small hill that was not very tall, and his chest was slightly panting, a sudden low growl came from the front. The sound sounded low and weak, but it revealed a trace of crisis, as if it contained a sense of decadence and lamentation. Zombie. When Liang Yue suddenly heard this sound, his heart tightened suddenly. Tension and curiosity mixed in his mind. Almost at the first moment, he quickly bent down and quietly leaned behind a big tree. Leaning on the tree trunk, holding the hand crossbow tightly in both hands, after taking a deep breath, he carefully poked his head out from behind the tree trunk. With a sweep of his eyes, he saw that at this time, a green figure was walking towards him from the downhill of the hill. This zombie was dirty, with strong bones, his hands stretched forward, his speed was neither fast nor slow, and his movement seemed a bit stiff. His eyes were wide open, his eyeballs were covered with bloodshot eyes, with a weird and hideous smile on his face. The direction was exactly where he was, looking at him head on. Liang Yue couldn't help but be attracted by it. For a while, he was actually a little distracted, except that it looks more like a person. The action mode is almost exactly the same as in the game, and ugly. But how did it detect me, eyes, or smell? Chapter 5 Forest Pool. While curious, Liang Yue's actions didn't slow down at all. Seeing the approaching zombie getting closer and entering his shooting range, its roars becoming more and more rampant, Liang Yue immediately and decisively raised the hand crossbow in his hand, held it in front of his eyes, held his breath, and aimed at the zombie's head. Paw accompanied by the sound of a bowstring, an arrow shot out instantly, flying to the target in the blink of an eye. With a sound, it pierced into the zombie's chest. However, after being hit by an arrow, The green zombie didn't seem to be greatly affected, only pausing slightly before continuing to walk towards him on its round face. The eerie smile became even more sinister seeing this. Liang Yue's eyes flickered a few times, and then he calmly pulled the trigger again. Swish, another arrow shot out, similarly hitting the zombie's chest with a sound hum. It's not dead? Did they say the attack power of this hand crossbow is 20? If I remember correctly, the health of this ordinary zombie should only be 20. Could it be that I have to aim for the head like in Resident Evil? With this question in mind, Liang Yue stared unblinkingly at the target in front of him and shot another arrow. As the zombie got closer, Liang Yue's accuracy also improved a lot. After the arrow shot out, it directly pierced the zombie's neck, this time accompanied by a reluctant wail. The green-skinned zombie finally tilted its body and fell weakly to the ground. Then, with a sound, it turned into a cloud of gray gas and dissipated. Sniff sniff. Seeing this, Liang Yue cautiously took a few steps forward and inhaled a little of the gray gas with his nostrils. After feeling it for a while, he realized that this thing didn't seem to be harmful. It takes 3 arrows to kill a zombie. It seems that the actual attack power of this hand crossbow is similar to the iron sword in Minecraft. Could it be that the information the system gave me is inaccurate? That shouldn't be the case. Facing the first monster in this novice world, the value of observing the monster's habits and collecting information about its behavior was actually far greater than eliminating it for Liang Yue. Therefore, after this purposeful observation, he found that this zombie seemed to be no different from the game, although I can't see the health bars of these monsters yet. According to my previous game experience, those skeleton archers, spider monsters, etc., also have 20 health points, and 3 arrows can solve them. With this judgment, Liang Yue finally had a clearer understanding of his position in this Minecraft world. And his heart became much more at ease. In fact, when killing that zombie just now, Liang Yue had been holding back, and the purpose was naturally to give himself enough time to observe if Liang Yue had really been focused on killing monsters. Although he still couldn't change the basic fact of 3 arrows per monster, his efficiency in killing enemies would definitely be much higher. As a hand crossbow, as long as the hand speed is fast enough, I wouldn't dare to say more, but 3 arrows per second seems very easy, right? Thinking of this, Liang Yue's mouth curved, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. The rules of the Minecraft world are very peculiar. Monsters can be roughly divided into 3 categories. The first category is undead monsters, represented by zombies and skeletons. These creatures can only exist in the dark or in the shadows. Once exposed to sunlight, they will continue to burn until they die. The second category is biological monsters, represented by creepers and spiders. They are not afraid of sunlight and can move freely. The former will self-destruct, while the latter are only aggressive when night falls or in dark caves. The third category of monsters is hell creatures, which are monster types that players will only encounter after entering the netherworld. In addition, the classification of witches, endermen, etc., is more complicated and relatively rare. The journey continued. After the appearance of the first zombie, Liang Yue unconsciously began to be more cautious. His spirit always tense compared to the game on the computer. The Minecraft in front of him is a real world. Although it still follows some peculiar world rules, the environment here is more logical. For example, although the ground is covered with a layer of short, dense lawn like in the game, a thick layer of fallen leaves inevitably accumulates in the forest in front of him, occasionally accompanied by dead branches and broken wood. At this moment, another zombie roar came from far to near, from the depths of the woods. Since there are no insects or birds in the Minecraft world in front of him, the forest is very quiet, so Liang Yue noticed and reacted almost immediately. He quickly came behind a tree trunk, stuck his head out to observe the situation, and after confirming that it was safe, he moved forward along the direction of the sound, gradually advancing with the trees in front of him as moving points. Soon, he found the swollen lower body of the zombie under a dense branch, and a sloping branch blocked its way. I didn't expect this thing to be so stupid that it actually got its neck stuck. Pop pop. The 3 consecutive arrows shot out almost without a gap. This time Liang Yue didn't hold back at all, but pulled the trigger at the fastest speed, and 3 arrows successively pierced the zombie's thigh. Although there is no so-called vital attack, in the face of the hand crossbow, a forced blood deduction game equipment, the zombie was still steadily taken away in one wave. 3 arrows for 1 zombie. Is the damage calculated according to independent attacks? I don't know which version of the game world's rules are based on. This thought flashed through Liang Yue's mind, but he quickly threw it behind him, wiped the sweat from his forehead, listened for a while, and after confirming that there was no movement around, he continued on his way. At this time, the sun in the sky was already high. looking like the sun was shining brightly, but Liang Yue quickened his pace unconsciously, walking quickly and silently through the forest. Looks like I'm lucky. About 2 hours later, Liang Yue, with a face full of sweat and a body of red meat, finally felt that he had reached the limit of his body and needed to sit down and rest. At this moment, through the gaps between the trees in front, a touch of blue light faintly appeared. Liang Yue's spirit was shaken, and he ran forward a few steps panting, pushed aside the dense branches in front of him, and a pond about 20 wide appeared in front of him. In the sunlight, a circle of fine sand surrounded the pool, making the water in the middle of the pool even brighter. Deeply exhaling a breath of turbid air, enduring his almost smoking throat, Liang Yue slowly walked over. The pool in front of him is not deep. The deepest point seems to be only 1 or 2 meters. The pool water is crystal clear, and the pool is quiet. It seems that there is no living thing growing in it, but Liang Yue knew that this was just an appearance according to some rules of the Minecraft world. As long as he patiently fishes here for a while with a fishing rod, fish will still be hooked in the small pool in front of him, and in this world, there seems to be no saying of diseases, so these water should be directly drinkable, right? Chapter 6 Living in a Tree. With this in mind, Liang Yue couldn't wait to step forward, squatting by the bank and stirring the water in the pool with his hand, a cool sensation instantly washing over his entire body. Having hurried for more than 2 hours, he was now genuinely exhausted, his body steaming with sweat, and his body fluids severely depleted. Looking at the clear pool of water before him, Liang Yue subconsciously swallowed. However, he ultimately restrained himself. Although he really wanted to plunge into the water and drink his fill without restraint, Liang Yue, who is always afraid of death, finally convinced himself otherwise. Although the pool in front of him seemed harmless, it was not his best option at that moment. On the other side of the pool's bank, a dense cluster of green plants resembling bamboo was growing on a patch of sandy soil close to the water's edge. Sugar cane. That's why I say we're lucky, huh? Exhaling a deep breath of stale air, Liang Yue took 3 steps as two, leaping and bounding towards the unusually tender, verdant green plants. He grabbed the straight stalks with both hands and kicked with force. With a light snap, the sugarcane broke off. Then he sat directly on the ground, peeled it skillfully, and began to chew it in large bites. Delicious. The taste was sweet, delicious and refreshing. Although it was just ordinary sugarcane, Liang Yue ate with exceptional enjoyment, completely forgetting himself. The sweet juice flowed down his throat, nourishing his body, and currents of warmth rapidly circulated from his stomach, soon spreading throughout his body. Liang Yue, who had been somewhat exhausted and fatigued, also began to recover quickly. About a quarter of an hour later, a sugarcane stalk about 4 meters long had been completely consumed by him, and his somewhat shriveled stomach was finally filled with a sense of fullness. Satisfied, Liang Yue stood up, then snapped off 3 more stalks from the sugarcane patch in front of him, chopped them into sections against a sharp-edged rock by the pool, and put them in his leather bag for storage. Now I don't have to worry about food for the time being. These few sugarcane stalks should last me at least a day. The most important thing now is to quickly find a place to stay, and then hunt monsters and hand in the task. Thinking of this, Liang Yue subconsciously looked up at the sun in the sky, which had already begun to gradually descend from the center, and felt a sense of urgency in his heart. So, after slightly identifying the direction, he plunged into the forest in front of him and resumed his journey. In fact, during the previous 2+ hours of travel, Liang Yue had not been without gains. Whenever he encountered any unusual noises while traveling, he would stop and carefully investigate. And then zombies. 8-10 spiders. 2-10 without deliberately courting death and actively running into caves along the way to explore. He had already brushed a wave of data for the goal of hunting 10 of each of the 5 types of monsters required in side quest 1. But how come I haven't even encountered a single little white? Speaking of which, the skeleton archer doesn't seem to be a rare monster, right? In the open space between the dense forests on both banks, a rocky hill suddenly rose up. This rocky hill was not high, the gentle slope was even less than 5 or 6 meters, and in the center of this rocky hill, a deep rift valley was blocking the way. According to Liang Yue's visual estimate, the width of the valley on both sides had to be at least 30 or 40 meters, the direction on the left and right sides was almost endless, and the bottom was nearly 100 meters deep. It made people feel dizzy just looking at it. Gusts of upward air currents were constantly sweeping in, making a whirring sound. A clear stream, only 2 or 3 meters wide, was pouring down from a place not far from Liang Yue, the clear water forming a small waterfall, ceaselessly pouring into the depths of the canyon. And what was even more breathtaking was that on the other bank of the canyon, not far from the waterfall, another stream of crimson lava was flowing down. The bubbling, slightly viscous appearance constantly released heat and illuminated everything around it in the real world. The scene of water and fire being difficult to coexist seemed to be a rare spectacle in this strange Minecraft world. As the sun set, one side of the deep canyon was now shrouded in a layer of shadow with the help of the light from the lava. Liang Yue could clearly identify several figures wandering around at the bottom of the canyon. Zombies, creepers, skeleton archers. There seemed to be quite a few, although the effective attack range of my crossbow is only about 10 meters. That's just the data for horizontal movement, right? Now at such a high distance, if I use the acceleration of gravity to launch a few shots. Thinking of this, Liang Yue, who was currently lying on the edge of the cliff looking down, couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. He subconsciously moved his arms, about to put it into action. However, he then temporarily suppressed this idea at this time. The sky was gradually darkening, and the sun on the horizon had already been dyed with a fiery red glow. Being in the dense forest, this trend was even more obvious. In view of this, Liang Yue felt that his most pressing goal now was to quickly find a place to stay. There seems to be a shallow cave over there, only about 3 or 4 meters deep, lying on the edge of the cliff. Liang Yue's eyes kept observing, and he quickly discovered a stone cave on the side of the valley cliff not far from the ground. With the help of the slanting sunlight, Liang Yue could almost see everything in the cave clearly. More importantly, the cave was not far from the lava flow. Unfortunately, this cave is on the opposite bank, so I can't use it for the time being, and there's almost no place on this cliff to climb and use as leverage. Seeing that his goal had failed, Liang Yue subconsciously scratched his head. Unwilling, he scanned the cliff wall below again, but still returned disappointed. After a brief moment of regret and lament, this guy quickly got up from the ground, glanced left and right, and then quickly walked along one end of the canyon in a chosen direction. Soon, dusk fell, and night descended when a crescent moon slowly rose from the horizon. Liang Yue still hadn't found a reliable place. Unable to do anything else, this guy had to temporarily find a relatively tall and independently formed tree, and quickly climb to the top of the tree. Fortunately, in this real Minecraft world, the trees in the forest are not the same as in the game, with the trunks as smooth and straight as a pillar. Although the forest in front of him only had one species of oak tree, there were still considerable differences between the plants, and it would be most appropriate to describe them as varied and diverse. Liang Yue, who had always considered himself a climbing expert, had also found a bug here. Big or small, what a pity. The canopies of the trees in the game are all airtight, and you can even walk and stand on them without restraint. Although the branches and leaves of this oak forest can also be described as dense, they are far from being so exaggerated. While his mind was wandering, Liang Yue, deep in the darkness, unconsciously widened his eyes, and his curled body subconsciously shrank back into the tree hollow, trying to hide himself completely in the fork of the branches beneath him. It seems I won't be sleeping tonight. Who knows how many monsters will come running over later. Chapter 7. Monsters are coming. Ugh, hiss, crack crack, here they come. In just a short moment, a considerable number of monsters abruptly appeared from all directions. Liang Yue perked up his ears, listening intently to the chaotic footsteps and roars from below, feeling a mix of apprehension and a faint stirring of excitement. Zombies, spiders, creepers, and that crackling sound must be skeleton archers. By the moonlight filtering through the gaps in the trees, Liang Yue could clearly discern the positions of the monsters below. His heart pounded in his chest, the surging blood constantly washing through his veins, carrying oxygen and vitality to every corner of his body. Liang Yue held his breath, his mind highly focused, a slight chill causing his back to tremble uncontrollably as his eyes darted around. A simple plan to eliminate the enemies formed in his mind. In general, the biggest threat to me right now is ranged units like skeleton archers. They're too dangerous and must be taken out first. Perched high above, he instantly locked onto a spot where a branch was swaying. Then pap 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 pap, accompanied by a series of rapid bowstring twangs, arrows rained down. Liang Yue, lying prone on the high tree branch, frantically pulled the trigger, his target a pale, skeletal figure in the darkness beneath the shadows of the trees. The arrows transformed into blurry gray streaks, covering a skeleton like a large net. It seemed impressive and overwhelming, but the power was quite limited. Firstly, the accuracy of the hand crossbow was poor, and even 3 arrows might not hit the target. Secondly, the distance between Liang Yue and these ranged skeleton archers had already exceeded the crossbow's 10-meter range, greatly reducing the arrow's power. However, fortunately, Liang Yue's hand crossbow was a game item, and although it had its flaws, its inherent advantages were unique. The astonishing firing rate of 3 or 4 arrows per second and the special attribute of unlimited ammunition were enough to eliminate his worries. In the darkness, Liang Yue, afraid of death and pain, had to cling tightly to the tree trunk in an awkward position to ensure that his body remained protected by the large tree above his hand. Gripping the crossbow, was pressed close to his waist, making effective aiming impossible. He could only rely on the general landing point of the arrows and the coordination of his peripheral vision to barely manage an attack, but even so, under Liang Yue's almost shameless rain of arrows, the skeleton archer he was aiming at in the distance was hit 4 or 5 times in succession. Thwack! A sudden bowstring sound rang out, the skeleton archer retaliating against the shameless coward. At the very least, he would suffer a flesh wound, and if he was unlucky, he would be paralyzed. Too bad, no matter how powerful it is, it's useless if it doesn't hit me. Heady Liang Yue, still lying on the tree like a dead dog, curled his lips into a lewd smile, while his finger on the crossbow never stopped twitching. A torrent of arrows, as if free of charge, flew towards the skeleton archer in the distance. Soon, 5 or 6 seconds passed. After several fruitless counterattacks, the skeleton finally turned into dust with resentment and grief. Killed a skeleton archer +1, who seems like it's not too difficult. After eliminating the first skeleton, Liang Yue was immediately filled with confidence. Then, with a slight twist of his wrist, the crossbow's arrow opening was aimed at another direction. Under the cover of the dense grass, several zombies were huddled together with a skeleton archer. They were roaring towards someone in the tree with guttural sounds. What are you yelling about? Come up here and hit me if you have the guts, you idiots. Liang Yue smiled contemptuously, and then his finger twitched like crazy. Pap 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 pap. Dense arrow feathers immediately covered the area, and the originally scattered trajectory seemed to become an advantage, constantly taking away a small amount of health from the huddled monsters. After about 5 seconds, monsters began to fall to the ground one after another, never to get up again. Killed a zombie +1, task kills 9 out of 10. Killed a zombie +1, task kills 10/10. Killed a creeper +1, task kills 1/10. Killed a spider +1, task kills 3 out of 10. Killed a zombie +1. Killed a skeleton archer +1, task kills 2/10. In less than a minute, this small group of monsters had turned into dust one after another, and the ground on one side of the tree was temporarily cleared. However, Liang Yue still did not dare to be careless. Almost instantly, he reversed the gun, carefully raised his arm, and placed the crossbow directly on his back, his body not moving at all throughout the process, and then pulled the trigger again. Pap 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 pap. The rain of arrows was like a curtain, as if overwhelming. Soon, another 3 to 5 minutes passed, and the tree trunk beneath Liang Yue was scattered with arrows, and the last skeleton archer under the tree finally shattered into a pile of powder. Killed a skeleton archer +1. Task kills 5 out of 10, who, after carefully looking around and confirming that there were no monsters with ranged attacks around him, Liang Yue finally breathed a long sigh of relief. He stood up from the tree trunk with a whoosh, looked at the few kittens left below, and couldn't help but stretch his vision. Glanced to the side, keenly noticing a dark shadow. Then, Liang Yue raised the hand crossbow again, vertically aimed at a huge spider that had secretly climbed up the tree trunk beneath him, and mercilessly pulled the trigger. Still want to sneak attack? The oak tree beneath Liang Yue was very tall, roughly estimated to be at least 20 meters high, and the fork in the main trunk where he was now was 10 meters away from the ground. In fact, after night fell, if it weren't for the fear of spiders that could climb trees, he could have continued up the branches of the tree. After finding a hidden branch, he might be able to sleep well, but reality has no ifs. In such a strange wilderness, any fluke could cause Liang Yue to capsize in the gutter when he couldn't ensure his own 100% safety. All he could do was try his best to eliminate the threat and make himself safer. Less than a quarter of an hour after it had just stopped, the familiar zombie howls came from the distance again. Helpless, Liang Yue had to lie on the fork of the tree again and carefully observe the situation. Wave after wave, there are really a lot of them. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: Little Zombie and Witch. The re-emergence of zombies and other monsters is also a characteristic product of the McWorld. That is, as long as it's night, if the player's surroundings are not completely illuminated, new monsters will continue to spawn in the surrounding area. Things like one-wave attacks don't exist here, but that's good too. The more monsters that come, the sooner I can finish my tasks. When I have the functions of a game character. Side quest: 1 zombies, 10 spiders, 6 skeleton archers, 5 creepers, 3 hum, Just these 4 types. Looking at the task data on the panel, Liang Yue subconsciously frowned. However, he didn't have much to complain about. In the metagame, this is indeed the situation. The 4 types of monsters on the panel are the most common in the game. As for the remaining types, they will only be mixed into the monster horde sporadically and will definitely not come in swarms like these 4. Forget it, I'll just wait slowly. I can't expect to become a fatty in one bite. Thinking this in his heart, Liang Yue fired a volley of arrows at the zombie under the tree. While also recalling information about various monsters in his mind, he continuously compared and analyzed which monster was both safe and easy to find, suitable to serve as the 5th set of data in this task. Just like that, as time passed, various monsters began to spawn under the tree where Liang Yue was hiding, roaring and rampaging, recklessly surrounding him, but they could only see him and couldn't touch him, unable to do anything to him. Liang Yue, on the other hand, followed a simple defense plan, keeping an eye on all directions. Prioritizing attacks on skeleton archers to eliminate hostile ranged attack units. After the archers were cleared, he continued to clean up the spiders, and then other types of monsters, methodical, yet with a clear goal. In this way, unknowingly, time flew by quickly. The crescent moon in the sky rose from the treetops to the center of the sky, and then slowly flew from the highest point of the night sky into the distance. When the first ray of sunlight in the morning rose from the end of the forest, Liang Yue's originally suspended heart finally began to slowly fall back into his stomach. Don't think that this guy was as steady as an old dog when fighting monsters before. Seemingly able to safely eliminate the monsters with just a flick of his finger. In fact, when he was facing the siege of hordes of monsters, he was always panicking in his heart. Although he had lived 2 lives and had some psychological preparation for the absurd and strange situation before him, Liang Yue was, after all, just an ordinary citizen who grew up in peaceful times. Even if he was lucky enough to be reborn and obtain the golden finger that others dreamed of, Liang Yue was still a pure novice after all. Just imagine, if you were to put someone else on the tree where Liang Yue was, and then put a group of monsters like zombies and skeletons below, you wouldn't even need to call them over to attack. It is estimated that as long as these monsters roared a couple of times and kept surrounding the area at that time, I am afraid that the person on the tree would be scared to pee. Huff. Just like that, squatting on the tree trunk, Liang Yue slowly sat up and half reclined there. Only after the sun had completely risen, only at this time did he realize that after a night of squatting and killing, the sweat on his body had already soaked his clothes. His stomach was rumbling with hunger, he was unbearably thirsty, and his whole body was sore. The finger that pulled the trigger was also numb and stiff. Even more outrageous was that Liang Yue didn't know how, but he had even gotten a stiff neck. The pain in his neck was piercing and unbearable, leaving him speechless. He took a hard bite of the sugar cane in his hand, and the sweet juice immediately flowed down his throat, slowly filling his stomach. A warm current began to surge, and then it continued to spread to all corners of his body, gradually restoring the strength in his body. Side Quest 1 Zombies. 10-10 Spiders. 10-10 Creepers. 10-10 Skeleton Archers. 10-10 Baby Zombies. 3-10 Witch. 1-10 After a night of slaughter, the first 4 types of ordinary monsters had been filled, and after exceeding the task's quantity limit, the system no longer counted. However, based on his own estimation, Liang Yue seemed to have destroyed no less than 100 zombies alone last night. What a waste. If I could have gotten the game ability earlier, I would have leveled up a lot, right? Speaking of which, compared to the game, there are really a bit more monsters in this world. Leaning against the branches behind him, Liang Yue was like a sloth bear at this time. Lazily rubbing and moving his somewhat stiff body, he hummed and groaned, occasionally making a few comfortable moans. But in his heart, a suspicion arose, and he secretly became more and more vigilant about this dangerous difference. The baby zombie on the task panel is a variant monster of zombies. Its size is only about half that of an ordinary zombie, and it also has 20 health points. The characteristic is that it is extremely fast. Liang Yue felt that if he and this baby zombie were placed on the ground, he might not be able to outrun it. However, fortunately, although this baby zombie is fast, it ultimately cannot climb trees, and in the end, it still died under his rain of arrows. Which, this is a very dangerous creature, originally a kind of human, but belonging to the evil camp. With 26 health points, the attack method is to throw poison bottles. One bottle of poison thrown over will often cause people to lose most of their lives. Even in the game, after the player is hit, the health bar will still drop wildly if there is no corresponding item to detoxify. The player's health will even decrease all the way to the minimum line. This is just the setting in the game, and Liang Yue is now a genuine natural person, If he is really careless and a bottle of poison is thrown on his forehead, he estimates that he might be poisoned to death on the spot. Fortunately, the timing of the witch's appearance last night was relatively good. It was during a gap when Liang Yue had cleared the surrounding monsters, without the restraint of monsters such as skeleton archers. In addition, Liang Yue's reaction at the time was also very alert. Almost at the first time he discovered the witch, he did not hesitate to climb to the higher treetops. Although the witch species can throw poison bottles and belongs to a ranged attack unit, her attack range is not as good as that of skeleton archers. When Liang Yue took the lead in climbing high, her threat to him had been greatly reduced, and it was precisely by taking advantage of this terrain advantage that he was finally able to win the battle without any danger. This is really a bit of luck. Chapter 9 Bottom Monster Slime. But now that we're talking about witches, I seem to remember some information in the game saying that witches only spawn if there's a witch hut. Thinking of this, Liang Yue, who was chewing on sugarcane like a starving ghost, stopped. He gently stroked his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Witch huts? If I remember correctly, these wild structures should only exist in swampy terrains, right? Speaking of swamps, is there such terrain in this forest? As soon as this thought arose, Liang Yue couldn't contain himself. He immediately threw the sugarcane aside and climbed to the top of a tree. Using both hands and feet, I remember the direction the witch came from last night. It should be over there. Standing on the treetop, Liang Yue gestured a couple of times before turning around and shifting his gaze to the other side. If we consider the Rift Valley directly in front of us as the 12 o'clock direction, then the place Liang Yue is looking at now should be in the lower left, around 7 or 8 o'clock. After observing for a long time, shielding his eyes with his hand, Liang Yue faintly noticed signs of swampy terrain at the end of his vision. The trees over there do seem a bit sparse. Looks like I'm probably right. But how did that witch come from so far away? Am I really that attractive? Thinking this, Liang Yue couldn't help but twitch his lips, a hint of self-deprecation flashing across his face. But then, he didn't waste any more time talking. He nimbly hugged the tree trunk and slid down the tree that had sheltered him all night. Picking up the sugarcane from the ground, he continued to chew on it, while tightly gripping the hand crossbow in his other hand, and then slowly walked in the predetermined direction. Compared to his rapid march through the forest yesterday, Liang Yue was now much more cautious. He would stop to observe the situation almost every step of the way, especially in those dark corners where the sunlight couldn't reach. He seemed somewhat careful, even cautious. However, it's no wonder that Liang Yue would act this way now. After all, this forest had just spawned hundreds of monsters last night. Although most of them were attracted by Liang Yue and eliminated under the big tree earlier, but even now, there must still be a considerable number of stragglers remaining in the forest. There might be zombies, creepers, skeleton archers, or even mutated species like baby zombies. Liang Yue couldn't afford to be careless. After all, this is no joke. Pa pa pa, ug pa pa pa, ug pa pa pa, crack pa 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 puchy. The bow and crossbow in his hand might not be powerful or have a long range, but after a whole night of endless attrition warfare, he now had quite a bit of experience with it. Those lone monsters had almost no power to resist in the face of the viper-like arrows, struggling in vain, and finally could only fall to the ground and turn into dust. Even skeleton archers, these ranged units, after Liang Yue mastered the rhythm of the battle, also became lambs to the slaughter, turning into a cloud of ashes after firing a few arrows. Time flew by quickly in this jungle battle. When the sun was high in the sky and Liang Yue's stomach growled again, he finally arrived at his destination. Pushing aside the dense branches in front of him, he was greeted by a new environment compared to the forest behind him. The terrain in front of him seemed very open, with ponds of varying sizes scattered throughout. Green water lilies floated quietly on the surface of the water, round like big pancakes, looking very leisurely in comparison. The trees here were still tall and straight, but they seemed a bit sparse. The air humidity was very high. As soon as he stepped into this new terrain, Liang Yue clearly felt that the surrounding temperature seemed to rise a lot. Invisibly podgy podgy podgy. After walking forward for a while, Liang Yue heard a strange sound in his ears. It sounded like some sticky substance was constantly churning in the mud, adding a bit of mystery to this quiet swampy land. However, as soon as Liang Yue heard this sound, his eyes lit up. A face that was originally slightly cautious suddenly flashed with a hint of excitement. I was right. There really is this thing in the swamp. Following the direction of the podgy sound, Liang Yue immediately tracked it, stepping deep and shallow. Finally, after turning past a large tree, he found the source of the sound in a shallow pool in front. He saw something green all over, semi-transparent, round, and soft, looking like an oval jelly pudding when Liang Yue locked onto this thing. It was constantly flapping up and down by the pool. It's just that although this thing looks very elastic, its actual jumping ability is a bit tragic. It can't even jump out of this shallow pool. Apart from being able to splash waves of water, it has almost no effect. It's you, slime. Looking at this strange creature in front of him, Liang Yue couldn't help but curl the corner of his mouth. A wicked smile mixed with excitement on his face. He raised the bow and crossbow in his hand, aimed at this green thing, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Pop pop pop, arrows flew one after another, easily piercing into the slime's body without much effort. Then, with a punchy, this slime, which was originally more than half a meter high, instantly shattered, and then divided into 4 smaller slimes. Then they continued to jump podgy in the pool, seeming to want to jump ashore to attack Liang Yue, but in the end, they couldn't even get ashore. Pop 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 pop, another burst of arrow fire. Liang Yue's fingers flew at this moment, and in just a few seconds, these 4 small slimes were once again eliminated without any resistance. Then it turned into a cloud of smoke and completely disappeared before his eyes. Looking around, confirming that there was no danger around, Liang Yue immediately moved his mind and summoned the task panel. Side quest 1 zombie, 1010 spider, 1010 creeper, 1010 skeleton archer, 1010 slime, 510 baby zombie, 310 witch, 110 woe. 1 is worth 5 of other monsters. Awesome. Looking at the newly appearing line of data on the panel, Liang Yue immediately grinned, revealing a face full of excited smiles, his eyes filled with a different kind of brilliance. Without a doubt, this kind of data judgment is definitely a great fortune for him. Originally, Liang Yue only thought of the swamp terrain from the witches spawning last night, and from the swamp terrain, he thought of another special type of monster in this area, the slime. Obviously, whether in the game or in the real world built on mech, the slime has always been a small, useless monster at the bottom and holding a crossbow, as long as he keeps a certain distance away from it. The danger of this thing is not even as good as a zombie. In order to be able to safely fill the number of the 5th type of monster in this side quest, Liang Yue naturally paid great attention to this clue. Therefore, as soon as he thought of this species before, he almost unhesitatingly came to this area to explore. Now it seems that all these adventures are worthwhile. Chapter 10 Add Rules. Pa, 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 pa. With hardly any effort, Liang Yue quickly followed the sound to find the second slime, and then a burst of arrows turned the little thing into a sieve. Slime killed +1, task kills 6 out of 10. Slime killed +1, task kills 7/10 +1, 8/10. Even the slightly listless fatigue from staying up all night last night was swept away. Side quest 1 has been completed. Does the host want to submit the quest now? Submit. Although he tried his best to suppress the excitement in his heart, the heart hidden in his chest was still beating uncontrollably. Liang Yue took a few deep breaths, leaned against the tree trunk behind him, and pretended to be calming. After inspection, the host has killed 5 kinds of hostile creatures according to the quest requirements, with at least 10 of each. The side quest A Small Test of Skill has now been completed. Does the host want to claim the quest reward? Claim. As soon as Liang Yue finished speaking, a strange white glow suddenly appeared around him. The light was very soft and did not affect his vision. It seemed to carry a soft, cool feeling, but it contained a palpitating power. Before he could react, the glow began to merge into his body, slowly and firmly. A tingling, comfortable sensation immediately emptied Liang Yue's mind, and his whole person was immersed in it. Unconsciously closing his eyes and naturally stretching out his hands, an invisible force slowly lifted his feet off the ground, raising him more than 2 meters into the air. At the same time, a stream of information began to slowly fill Liang Yue's mind, which was knowledge about the mech world. Also part of the quest reward, it included the special rules of this world, as well as some tool synthesis and forging recipes. Simple, effective, and with some potential for improvement. For Liang Yue at this time, it was practical and extremely powerful. About 5 minutes later, all the white light had completely merged into his body with a plop. Liang Yue then fell from the air to the ground. His tightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and a gleam of light flashed instantly. Slowly, an excited smile bloomed on his slightly childish face. Now, I can finally rest assured. After muttering to himself, Liang Yue suddenly turned around and looked at the thick swamp oak tree in front of him. He subconsciously looked down at his fist. At this moment, on his fair knuckles, traces of newly scabbed wounds were still vivid. This was a rather painful memory. Only a short day apart, he was now completely different from himself yesterday. Tisk. He gently kissed his wound, then clenched his fists and unleashed a frantic output against the gully-filled tree trunk in front of him. Adada. Adada. At this moment, His fists were thrown out like a mad dog. Without any fancy moves, each strike would cause a twisted crack to appear on the tree trunk, as if it couldn't withstand the weight of his fist and was about to be shattered directly. But Liang Yue himself knew that it was obviously impossible for him to shatter such a thick tree trunk with one punch. At this stage, the cracks in the wood were actually just a special form of expression based on Mook rules. In fact, this was similar to the harvesting skill in some online games. The appearance of cracks was more like a progress bar. Bang, bang, bang. As Liang Yue's fists continued to strike, the cracks began to slowly expand. When they spread to the entire piece of wood, there was a soft pop, and the wooden block immediately jumped out from the middle of the tree trunk. It landed on the grass next to it and turned into a shrunken wooden square, slowly rotating. As soon as Liang Yue approached, the small square suddenly swooshed and was absorbed into his body. However, this wooden block was certainly not integrated into his body, but was automatically stored in a special space. Liang Yue could clearly feel the existence of that space at this time. The location was somewhat ambiguous, but it didn't seem too far from him. Inventory, come out with a thought. A light curtain that was obviously different from the system panel suddenly popped up in front of him. A Q version of the character model, 6 equipment slots, 5 synthesis tool slots, and as many as 36 storage squares below. The wooden square that he had just automatically absorbed into his body was now quietly stored in the storage square. With a thought from Liang Yue, the small wooden block, which had been reduced in size several times, immediately appeared in his hand. Then, with a page, he put it on the ground. Looking at it now, the shape of the wooden block has undergone no small changes. Although the material is still wood and the outside is still covered with bark, the original gully-filled and natural wood curves have now directly turned into a square, angular cube. It was truly extraordinary. Liang Yue compared it and found that the side length of the wooden block was probably just under 1 meter, about 90 centimeters. After being placed on the ground, it was as if it had taken root and could not be pushed no matter how hard he tried. He could only turn it back into a small square by hitting it, so that it could be put back into the storage space again. At this time, looking back at the previous big tree, I saw that in the middle of the oak tree trunk at this time, although there was such a large piece of tree trunk missing, 90 centimeters square, it was still steadily suspended in midair, without the slightest intention of falling down. This scene can be described as strange in general. It's almost exactly the same as in the game, but there's more of a mimicry ability. I'll have to slowly experiment with that later. Thinking of this, Liang Yue curled the corner of his mouth, clenched his fists again, and smashed them towards the tall oak tree in front of him. Strangely enough, although he knew that being able to smash the tree was not related to the strength of his body, but purely the effect of the special game rules of the Mook world. But compared to before, when Liang Yue was punching the tree, causing 0.1 damage to the enemy and 800 damage to himself, now he was still punching the tree. But at this time, the touch of the fist against the tree trunk felt like hitting a piece of silicone. This feeling was really indescribable. The difference in between, I am afraid only he himself can figure it out. Under the sway of Liang Yue's fist shadows, in almost less than half a minute, the oak tree in front of him, which was more than 10 meters high, had been beaten into a pile of debris. The small wooden blocks were put into the storage space one after another, and large pieces of leaves fell on the ground. Even more miraculously, after the leaves slowly dissipated and slowly merged into the ground, 4 neat oak saplings and 2 red apples suddenly popped up on the spot. Chapter 11 Sunset Canyon. Picking up the apple, Liang Yue didn't doubt it at all, because he knew that the bizarre setting of oak tree canopies dropping apples was unique to Minecraft. Just so happens I am hungry. Looking at the tempting fruit in his hand, Liang Yue took a big bite, directly biting off a little more than half, but the next moment, he froze. A fragrance and sweetness different from any apple in the real world instantly swirled in his mouth, accumulating, flowing down, and then exploding in his body. With just one bite of the apple, Liang Yue felt as if his entire person had lost 3 pounds. A sense of coolness and comfort instantly anesthetized half of his body for a moment. Liang Yue felt that he seemed to taste a certain artistic conception in this fruit, as if the king of medicine was in the world, able to make people unconsciously immersed in it. After a long while, this guy slowly recovered from the deliciousness, and then, like a hungry ghost reincarnated, he stuffed the fruit into his stomach in 2 or 3 bites. In the end, he didn't even let go of the seeds, leaving only an apple core. This is too exaggerated, right? It's just a fruit. Speaking of which, this shouldn't be an apple, right? The two may just look similar. Standing in place, shaking his head and savoring it for a while, Liang Yue then calmed himself and continued to move forward. Now that he had initially merged with the rules of the Minecraft world and obtained the abilities of a game character, He was confident that he could protect himself. Therefore, based on the idea that a good horse doesn't eat, he didn't plan to go back, but continued to walk towards the depths of the swamp along the terrain in front of him. Of course, the so-called self-protection ability was naturally also based on the conditions of sufficient materials and excellent equipment. So, along the way, Liang Yue almost transformed into a walking human harvester, and wherever he went, whether it was trees or weeds, he unceremoniously plundered them all. It wasn't until he had collected 5 stacks of wood and obtained more than 30 large apples that he stopped contentedly. And in the world of Minecraft, weeds produce wheat seeds. In Liang Yue's side quest too, he seemed to need to build a self-sufficient plantation, and it had to have 3 kinds of crops. Wheat was undoubtedly the easiest to obtain to this end. Liang Yue also cut countless weeds along the way, and only stopped after collecting 2 stacks of wheat seeds. Let me see, now that I have the materials, according to the crafting formula, 1 wood equals 4 planks, and 2 planks equal 4 sticks. 4 planks can make a 3x3 crafting table. And then 2 sticks plus 3 planks can make a wooden axe, then another wooden pickaxe, a pickaxe and an axe. That should be enough, right? After I mine some stone later, I can directly make stone pickaxes and stone axes. Stone ones are more durable. Finding a solid and safe place to stay had become an urgent task. Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but look around, and almost all he could see was a green pond and muddy ground. Unknowingly, a faint mist had begun to rise from the almost continuous ponds, slowly forming a sheet looking over. Suddenly, the entire swamp at this time was like a hazy maze, making people feel depressed. It wasn't until this time that Liang Yue suddenly realized that he seemed to have been a little too reckless before, and had carelessly been trapped in this swamp. I guess this can be considered as bringing it upon myself. Realizing that the situation was not good, someone couldn't help but smile bitterly. However, fortunately, Liang Yue was far from being in a desperate situation, and relying on his fairly good memory, he identified the direction. Then, he strode towards the 12 o'clock direction in front of him, which was the location of the previous Rift Valley. This run lasted for more than half an hour. With the Minecraft rules in place, Liang Yue's body had been transformed into data to a certain extent, and his whole body would no longer have any fatal vital parts like in the past. The monsters in the forest could no longer kill him with one blow, and even limb disabilities did not exist. Therefore, Liang Yue, who was in a hurry to get on the road at this time, was no longer as cautious as before. Even if he found traces of monsters on the way, he would pass by directly, almost completely ignoring their existence. It was under this kind of rushing mode that Liang Yue finally rushed to the location of the canyon before the sky darkened. Then, this guy took out the wooden pickaxe from the storage space with almost no nonsense, panting, and began to excavate the stone hill on the side of the canyon fiercely with handy tools. His speed of collecting materials naturally rose to another level. Without much effort, a stack of 64 units of stone had been mined. By the way, while mining the stone, Liang Yue also carved out a passage for himself on the cliff wall of the Rift Valley. The shape of this passage was like an inclined staircase, and it only allowed one person to pass, extending to the middle waist position of the cliff wall. In order to ensure the safety of his retreat, Liang Yue then very wretchedly sealed the entrance of this passage with rock blocks, making the passage where he was located a semi-enclosed space. It can be said that it does not connect to the sky above, nor does it touch the ground below, leaving only a window on the side of the canyon for lighting. That's cool. At this moment, Liang Yue, who was lying on the balcony of the cave in the cliff, looking outwards, quickly discovered a patch of black dots on the opposite rock mass. With the afterglow of the setting sun, he almost immediately judged the nature of this substance. Now, I can finally have a good night's sleep tonight. After this discovery, Liang Yue immediately took out a crafting table from the storage space and made several spare stone pickaxes for himself according to the recipe of 2 sticks and 3 stones. With a flick of his sleeve, a small cube representing the woodblock immediately appeared in his hand. After simple stacking and connection, a wooden bridge of 3 units, nearly 3 meters wide, suddenly appeared on the rock wall in front of him. Liang Yue was sitting on the edge of the balcony at this time, stepped on it with one foot, stepped on it a few times, and found that the wooden bridge was motionless and unusually strong. Then he stood up tremblingly, looking at the drop of more than 50 meters below. Even with his big heart, it was still beating wildly and unpromisingly. The next moment, accompanied by a gust of updraft rising from the bottom of the Rift Valley, this guy's knees softened immediately, and he knelt on the bridge. Chapter 12. Finally I can sleep peacefully. Whoa, the game wasn't this exciting. Secretly wiping the sweat from his forehead, Liang Yue's legs trembled, and he gasped for breath. He wanted to stand up and walk, but Alice, the spirit, was willing, but the flesh was weak, helpless. He could only crawl on his knees towards the end of the wooden bridge. Then, he crawled forward slowly, piling up wooden blocks as he went. His speed wasn't slow, and in just 2 or 3 minutes, he had crossed the 30 or 40-meter wide canyon beneath him, connecting to the rock wall on the other side. Immediately, Liang Yue flipped his hand, and the wooden cube in his palm instantly transformed into the stone pickaxe he had synthesized earlier. Bang, 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 accompanied by a series of clanging sounds. A small stone cave was quickly carved out of the almost 90-degree vertical cliff face. Liang Yue then rolled nimbly, plunged headfirst into the cave, and began hacking at the dark pile of coal with his pickaxe in a whirlwind of gray shadows looking at him now. His face was contorted, his white teeth clenched tightly, as if he were venting his anger. After a while, this small coal mine was exhausted, yielding only 12 pieces, but that was enough. Carefully returning to the stone cave on the opposite bank via the wooden bridge, Liang Yue didn't forget to dismantle the bridge to prevent monsters from spawning on the other side. When night fell, 1 piece of coal plus 1 wooden stick can be synthesized into a torch. So let's make 8 of them first. At this time, the sun on the horizon was gradually setting, and the remaining light was no longer enough to illuminate the canyon. The sky was dimming, and night was approaching. Fortunately, Liang Yue now had torches. This seemingly inconspicuous item actually holds a pivotal position in the world of Mick. First of all, the torch itself is not afraid of wind or rain. Once placed, it will continue to burn until the player actively retrieves it. To some extent, this thing seems to belong to the same category of creations as Liang Yue's hand crossbow, almost infinitely usable, and as long as there is torchlight within a certain range, monsters will no longer spawn. This is simply too important for him right now. You should know that Liang Yue has hardly rested from noon yesterday until now. Even though he is only 16 years old, a young man, healthy, and resilient, he still can't take it for too long. It's just a pity that the situation before simply didn't allow Liang Yue to relax in the slightest, and he could only persevere until now. Thwack! After a quick synthesis, a torch was immediately stuck on the stone wall of the cave. The bright torchlight instantly drove away the darkness, illuminating this small space. Looking at the small, almost defenseless nest around him, Liang Yue subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief, and a relaxed smile appeared on his face. However, immediately afterward, his expression changed, and he quickly went up the stairs back to the ground, quickly placing a few torches in the passage. After returning to the cave, he also sealed the entrance and the window on one side before finally feeling completely at ease. Immediately afterward, Liang Yue flipped his hand again, using wooden blocks to build a solid wood platform in the corner as a bed. Throwing the cowhide bag behind him onto it, then, with a face full of fatigue, he sat down with a thud, his expression slightly listless. Taking an apple from the storage space, he ate it slowly. And Liang Yue couldn't help but start to drift off while feeling dazed. It wasn't until the fruit was completely stuffed into his mouth that his eyes regained focus. It seems I'm too tired. Whatever it is, let's talk about it tomorrow. Gently tapping his temples, Liang Yue then lay down on the wooden bed behind him, using the cowhide bag as a pillow, and slowly closed his eyes. In just a moment, the small cave began to echo with rhythmic, light snoring at the same time. Just as Liang Yue fell asleep peacefully and gradually immersed himself in dreams, monsters were being spawned one after another in places he couldn't see: the dense forest at the top of the canyon, the dark crevices beneath the ground fissure, and on the opposite bank of the cliff, the cave that someone had just carved out for coal mining. Agoo! Crack, 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 waves of monster roars intertwined, making the surroundings noisy. It was unknown how they sensed Liang Yue's presence, but it seemed that their ferocity became even more restless under invisible eyes. From time to time, several monsters that couldn't bear it would jump directly from the top of the canyon, all for the sake of getting close for that one moment. However, Liang Yue was now in the self-dug cave in the center of the cliff, neither reaching the sky nor touching the ground. Later, in order to get a good night's sleep, he even completely sealed a light opening near the cliffside. Now, not to mention monsters attacking, being in an absolutely sealed cave, I'm afraid not even a trace of outside sound can get in. Fortunately, even if the space is closed, there is no shortage of air in the world in front of him. Liang Yue, who is familiar with the Mick rules and information, naturally became even more fearless. Morning, or maybe it was morning when Liang Yue naturally woke up from his sleep. The fatigue and listlessness on his body had long disappeared, and strands of full power were filling all parts of his body. Stretching leisurely, his whole body immediately made a series of cracking sounds. Rubbing his somewhat swollen cheeks, Liang Yue looked left and right, and then yawned, taking the stone pickaxe and chiseling towards the bottom of the cliff. However, The first thing that caught his eye at this time was a dim scene immediately afterward. The sound of rain rang in his ears. A gust of cool and slightly humid air rushed towards him, immediately lightening Liang Yu's originally somewhat drowsy mind. It's raining. Really, it's a good thing it wasn't yesterday. Through the window in front of him, Liang Yue discovered the figures of several zombies and skeleton archers on the opposite side of the line of sight, almost effortlessly separated by a distance of 30 to 40 meters. It was not enough for the other party to notice him. At this moment, these monsters were aimlessly wandering in the rain. However, rainy weather is not good news for Liang Yue at this time, because without the sun's rays, undead creatures, mainly zombies and skeletons, can freely move on the earth. In other words, the monsters that had accumulated all night last night survived because of this rain. Since this is the case, the task of going out to collect and reclaim land can only be temporarily shelved. Let's mine first, and get some coal and iron out as soon as possible. Let's upgrade the iron tools and make a set of armor. Helplessly scratching his head, Liang Yue then revised his itinerary plan for today. After eating 2 apples for breakfast, he carried the stone pickaxe and chiseled all the way down the cliff. Chapter 13 Skill, Ricochet. With a flash of light, Liang Yue appeared inside the room. It was the same familiar bed, the Baroque-style lily-of-the-valley chandelier overhead, the solid wood desk with slightly worn corners, the thick-back steel cleaver at his feet, and the black backpack filled with various wilderness survival tools. Looking at the full-length mirror that was at least a man's height, after a month of survival trials in another world, Liang Yue had undergone varying degrees of change, both physically and mentally. Finally back, still wearing the black sportswear that had accompanied him for a whole month. Liang Yue seemed to have grown taller and become more robust and streamlined compared to a month ago, so much so that the outfit that had fit him perfectly before he left now seemed a little small. Looking at himself in the mirror with his slightly tanned skin, Liang Yue tugged at the corners of his mouth, reached out and flicked the slightly long hair in front of his forehead, then quickly took off the clothes. Opening the closet next to him, he found a large pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and walked towards the bathroom system. I stayed in the McWorld for a whole month. How long has it been here? Less than a second. That's not bad. The host has successfully completed the main quest of the Novus World Mech, achieving the 30-day survival requirement. Does the host want to receive the quest reward now? Liang Yue, who was scrubbing himself vigorously with a bath towel, paused in his movements when he heard this. The reward for the main quest, I remember it should be to open the system store. Claim, Ling. The system store function is now activated. Please check it yourself. Hosting. After completing the Novus trial, the host will automatically receive a lottery privilege. The range of prizes is vast, and the prize level fluctuates up and down with the host's own strength as the median. Each natural month, the host will automatically receive a lottery privilege. This month's lottery benefit has been issued. Does the host want to draw the lottery now? Draw. Draw now. Faced with the good news that followed, Liang Yue was no longer in the mood to take a bath. He hastily rinsed off the foam on his body, wiped himself twice with a towel, and ran back to the bedroom. At this time, with Liang Yue's order, a large black turntable suddenly appeared in the light curtain in front of him, filled with various items, and the center of the turntable was a slender red pointer. It was a pity that this guy had shouted the order a little too early. By the time he excitedly climbed onto the bed, the turntable and pointer in front of him had already started to rotate in the opposite direction. In the blink of an eye, it became impossible to tell what was what. Seeing this, Liang Yue frowned subconsciously, and had no choice but to give up the idea of observing. Stop! At the moment his voice fell, the turntable on the light curtain immediately went from its original rapid rotation to a standstill, with only the central pointer still moving rapidly due to inertia. As time passed, the speed of the pointer's rotation began to slow down, until finally, under Liang Yue's focused gaze, it came to a complete stop, and the item in the area pointed to by this red pointer turned out to be a strange icon, a bullet shot forward diagonally, with a golden trajectory behind it that was almost identical to the logo of a well-known brand, shaped like a Ling. Congratulations to the host for drawing the long-range offensive skill Ricochet in this lottery benefit. This skill comes from a certain mod character in Torchlight 2. Does the host want to claim the reward? So lucky? It's actually a skill? Claim. After listening to the system's introduction of the prize, Liang Yue's eyes lit up immediately, and he replied without hesitation. Then, the skill icon on the lottery turntable in front of him began to slowly enlarge, slowly flew out of the turntable, and finally turned into a stream of light. With a whoosh, it drilled into his brain in an instant. A massive stream of information filled his mind in a very strong manner. Liang Yue immediately softened, and lay on the bed like a caterpillar, Holding his head, humming and groaning involuntarily about 2 or 3 minutes later, the abnormality in his brain gradually subsided. It's just a skill that can't be considered very powerful, but I didn't expect it to contain so much information. Even the training methods are included. Liang Yue sat up with a wry smile, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and subconsciously rubbed his temples with his hands to relieve the previous symptoms. The so-called ricochet skill actually refers to a special technique that uses the principle of bullet reflection and refraction to perform extended attacks. However, those skilled marksmen sometimes use this ricochet phenomenon to achieve a certain degree of attack, or even assassination. For example, Deadshot in Suicide Squad, played by Will Smith, he is a master in this regard, and the ricochet skill that Liang Yue has drawn now is actually roughly using this technique, and extending, summarizing, and even magically transforming it on top of it. Ricochet, use long-range weapons to fire reflective bullets. Level 115 current level. 1 skill proficiency. 0-100 mana cost. 8 deals 60% weapon damage DPS. First stage reward, fires 3 ricochet bullets at once. Second stage reward, 50% chance to blind the target. Third stage reward, fires 5 ricochet bullets at once. Releasing the skill requires bow, crossbow, shotgun or pistol. Liang Yue had been exposed to the game Torchlight 2 in his previous life. Although the skill in front of him had been improved by the system, some of the basic rules were still valid. For example, in the skill information, the so-called first, second, and third stage rewards actually correspond to the 5th, 10th, and 15th levels of the skill level respectively. Only when the skill level reaches the corresponding requirements can one be qualified to enjoy such rewards. For Liang Yue, whose ricochet skill is only level 1, it has almost nothing to do with him except as a small goal to look forward to. Bows, crossbows, and even shotguns can be used to ricochet. It's amazing, but... System, what's up with that mana cost? I don't seem to know any magic now, do I? Staring at the line of small print in the skill information, Liang Yue couldn't help but feel a bad feeling in his heart. Please explore it yourself, host. As expected. Chapter 14, Basement Token. After racking his brains and exhausting all methods without success, Liang Yue had no choice but to temporarily skip this part and planned to find an opportunity to solve his lack of magic power in the future. Open the system store. As soon as he spoke, the system screen in front of him immediately changed. Just like some of the cliché online games in his previous life, the periphery of the screen was quickly decorated into an antique shop, with countless shelves vaguely placed behind the counter. Looking around, there were all kinds of colorful clouds and dazzling treasures. However, at this moment, there was only one lonely item placed on the front desk. Liang Yue glanced at it, and his old face was immediately covered with the black lines. Isn't that the hand crossbow I got before? How dare it be priced at 100 points? What's going on with this system, Ling? The current operating mechanism of the store is to put some of the items that the host has obtained in system activities on the shelves for the host to purchase in batches. In addition, every 3 natural days, an item will be randomly refreshed and placed on the store counter. After the host chooses to purchase it, this item will be permanently on the shelf. Subsequently, just as the system's voice fell, a square next to the hand crossbow suddenly flashed with light, and a palm-sized paper bag appeared there. On the surface of the bag, there was also a picture, and at a glance, it seemed to be the seeds of some kind of green substance. Seeing this, Liang Yue turned his gaze and quickly found a few lines of information below the paper bag. Hop seeds, 10 seeds, from the Stardew Valley Game World product introduction. As long as the climate is suitable, the crop can continue to grow after planting. After the plant matures, it produces high-quality hops for brewing. Stardew Valley's unique high-end ale product features. Just put the hops and water into the wine barrel, and it will ferment on its own. Seed price 100 points. Looking at the newly refreshed product in front of him, Liang Yue suddenly felt a stomachache, twitched the corners of his mouth a few times, and was speechless for a long time. It can be said that as long as you have this crop, whether it is in the game or in reality, it is definitely a money-making tool. But the problem now is this style of mine. It's not a casual urban setting. This is Marvel. You're supposed to be a hunting system. Can you be a little more reliable? Liang Yue had a dark face at this time, looking at the system store in front of him for a long time without saying a word, and 2 streams of hot air spurted out of his nostrils from time to time. After a long while, he suddenly flipped his sleeve, and a dark token suddenly appeared in his hand. Needless to say, this token was naturally the reward given by the system after the 3rd mission in the Novus world, which was to establish a fully equipped shelter in the McWorld Outpost. Token information introduction. With this token, the host can choose any world as a permanent outpost. After the outpost is established, it can be teleported from any time and any place in reality. Usage requirements. The chosen world must be a plane that the host has entered, excluding the world before the host transmigrated. Use the outpost token and lock the permanent world to Mick. Looking at the dark token in his hand, Liang Yue quickly made a choice after only a few seconds of thinking. Then the token suddenly rose with a crystal light, as if it was covered with a layer of water. Then, with a whoosh, it disappeared in front of his eyes. Seeing this, Liang Yue was immediately a little confused. However, before he had time to ask, a special feeling instantly appeared in his mind. Just like after accepting the fusion of the McWorld rules, he could clearly feel the character panel and storage space bound to him after the outpost token disappeared. Liang Yue now had a new feeling. However, compared to the former, this newly emerging feeling was more obscure and hidden, and the distance seemed to be farther to establish a connection with it. It would take a certain amount of time for preliminary communication. This may be the loading bar, the system said. But it's not too difficult. After spending some time exploring on his own, he quickly found the path to enter the outpost. Liang Yue then moved his mind, and the next moment the whole person instantly disappeared from the bed. Plop. Ouch. After a change of light and shadow, when Liang Yue had almost no feeling, he once again landed in the McWorld. Then, he fell horizontally directly on the ground. Fortunately, the place where he appeared was not a dangerous place, and it was not too far from the ground. Looking around, after Liang Yue clearly saw the environment around him, he was immediately overjoyed. The system still has a little conscience, knowing to send me to this base camp, which saves me a lot of effort. Quickly getting up from the ground and patting the dust off his body, Liang Yue then leisurely inspected the area in front of him with his hands behind his back. Not bad. This is exactly the shelter he had spent a lot of effort to build before leaving the McWorld. Originally, according to the requirements of the system task, the so-called shelter only needed to be safe, strong, and have a bed, workbench, furnace, map, and a self-sufficient plantation, and plant 3 kinds of crops. However, when Liang Yue gained the ability of the game character, there were still a full 28 days left in the survival trial. In addition to exploring and finding a suitable base location, he still had plenty of time to use. As a result, the original so-called shelter was developed by him into a farm base with a very large area. At this time, under the shining of the bright sky within a basin surrounded by snow-capped mountains and dangerous peaks, a vibrant land was being nurtured. Golden wheat fields grew in patches on the ground, and when the breeze blew, the rolling wheat waves were endless. Water channels were arranged in rows, green sugarcane was planted on both sides, and watermelons and pumpkins grew intermittently among them. Not far away, piles of potatoes and carrots made people look very happy. On the other side of the base, within a solid fence, groups of cattle, sheep, pigs, and chickens were mixed together, gathering in their respective groups, and occasionally making leisurely calls. In the center of this field and pasture, a not too large 2-story building was located there. The architectural style was simple and fashionable, full of modern design. Next to this small building was a natural lake. In his spare time, Liang Yue also built a small pier on the shore, and occasionally went there to fish. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15: Simple Farming Mode. Regarding the use of the Stronghold token, this was naturally not a decision Liang Yue made rashly on a whim, but a result of his careful consideration. In fact, when the system determined that he had completed the shelter mission, only half of the 1-month survival trial had passed. In the remaining 10 days or so, Liang Yue had weighed the pros and cons of this matter several times, but in the end, he made the current decision. Undoubtedly, although the current McWorld looks good, if it is placed among the myriad worlds, it would definitely not be considered outstanding. Although the rules of McWorld seem mysterious, at its core, it is just a game world that focuses on survival and construction. With limited potential, its advantages are obvious, but its disadvantages are also prominent. For example, no matter how long Liang Yue develops according to the McRoute, he seems unable to solve the magic consumption problem of the ricochet skill. In addition, although the McWorld can be upgraded, this upgrade mechanism is actually just a way to store experience points, and players cannot become stronger as a result. Its ultimate purpose is only to serve as consumables for the enchantment mechanism. It can be said that the effects of the McWorld's rule system are mostly reflected in its role in assisting survival. However, this is precisely one of the main reasons why Liang Yue finally made up his mind to use the Stronghold token here. In his opinion, the so called Journey Through the Myriad Worlds and Hunting of the Heavens depends on one's own efforts and opportunities, and only by increasing one's own strength and improving one's survival ability can he have the opportunity to talk about other ideas as time goes by. The future trial worlds will inevitably become stronger and more worthy of entry, but the premise of all this is that he himself must be able to live to that time. Although the current Mech world does not have much growth potential, it is definitely competent as a logistics support base. Liang Yue is currently in the initial stage, and every opportunity to become stronger is precious. Especially under the system's huge pit, only by trying to make good use of all the resources at hand can he possibly strive for the best results. In addition to the inherent rule advantages of Mech, there are also some differences in the time flow ratio between this world and reality at the current stage of the stronghold base. Specifically, about 2 days here are equal to 1 day in reality. Oh, that's not bad. Doesn't this mean there's twice as much time out of thin air? Whether it's used for training or recuperation, it will be a good advantage. Anything else? In addition, as a stronghold world, the system will also issue certain upgrade tasks from time to time in order to better help the host control the world. Control the Mech world? Can you be more specific? Upon hearing this, Liang Yue's heart stirred, and while his thoughts ran wild, he quickly asked. For example, at the current stage, the host can only use the stronghold world as a private otherworld for development and application, with many restrictions, and cannot mobilize the resources of the stronghold world at any time. Only through the special rules of initial fusion with the host's body can simple transportation be carried out to a limited extent. The host cannot even freely allocate resources directly between the stronghold and reality. That's true, but with a storage space on my body, it should be enough for the time being. After listening to the system's words, Liang Yue nodded subconsciously, looking very convinced. Then, with a thought, he summoned the system store. Looking at the hop seeds on the shelf, after hesitating for a moment, he finally chose to click buy. You never know when you might need it. 100 mission points quickly disappeared, and 10 hop seeds were added to Liang Yue's storage space. He took it in his hand and looked at it carefully, but in the end, he found that he couldn't see anything special about it. Helpless, he could only give up this meaningless act, and instead, with a flip of his sleeve, took out a hoe from the storage space. Planting crops in the Mech world is very simple. Just take the hoe and knock it on the ground twice, and the original grassland will instantly be transformed into arable land. Since the land that Liang Yue chose to knock on was right next to the ditch, he could even skip the watering step this time. Similarly, as a casual farming game, the hop seeds from the Stardew Valley world are also very simple and crude to plant. Just bury the seeds in the soil, and small seedlings will immediately grow out of the ground. Moreover, hops themselves are a vine-like herbaceous plant, so with the help of the Stardew Valley laws, while growing small seedlings, a beautiful wooden frame will automatically form next to them. This is to facilitate the hop plants to entwine and cling to them after they grow to a certain stage. Therefore, in less than half a minute, a row of 10 neatly planted crops, plus plant wooden frames, had already appeared in front of him. Why don't I feel any sense of accomplishment? After inspecting his base, Liang Yue returned to reality. Although the air in the Mech world is good, nourishing, and the time flow is twice as fast as in reality, it looks like an ideal place to live in seclusion. But Liang Yue is only a high school student after all, and has not yet grown to the point of living in seclusion. Moreover, he had already lived in the Mech world for a month, and he had long been thinking about the prosperous city life. Returning to his bedroom, and replacing his bed with a genuine Mech wool bed, Liang Yue peacefully entered dreamland. At the same time, just as the Western Hemisphere entered the nighttime, and most people ended their day's work and began to rest, on the other side of the earth, in remote Central Asia on a barren desert road, a convoy consisting of 3 military Humvees was slowly driving under the scorching sun. The convoy was obviously centered on the middle vehicle, with explosive heavy metal music constantly emanating from the car windows, and the other 2 vehicles guarded it in front and behind. After a while, the convoy drove into a low mountain area, and almost all of both sides of the road were undulating hills. A divine falcon was flying high in the sky, circling twice, and then flew into the distance in the blink of an eye. The self-righteous and powerful American convoy at this time had no idea that in this land that seemed to be under their jurisdiction, a long-planned crisis was quietly descending. Chapter 16. Want to do something shameful? According to the latest news from our station, the famous arms dealer, chairman of Stark Industries, billionaire Tony Stark, was attacked by terrorists in the Middle East this morning and is missing. So far, Tony Stark's body has not been found, but all the other U.S. soldiers responsible for security in the convoy have been killed. As of now, no organization or individual has claimed responsibility for the incident. According to intelligence collected by the local U.S. military, This is likely a premeditated attack and kidnapping. To this end, in the early morning, Liang Yue woke up from his slumber and had just finished his personal hygiene after turning on the TV in the living room. Before he could take out the Minecraft-specific eggs and milk from his storage space to make breakfast, his attention was immediately drawn to this news report. After a long while, he came back to his senses, shook his head unconsciously, and walked towards the kitchen with the ingredients in his hand. The plot is finally starting. By the way, system, I forgot to ask you last night, how often does all heavens hunting occur? After finishing breakfast and making an international call to his mother back in China, Liang Yue finally remembered the important matter and quickly asked. Currently, the hunting trial will be activated once every 30 natural days. The selection criteria for the trial world is the upper limit of the host's own strength. Hearing this, Liang Yue blinked and subconsciously summoned his character interface. After a month-long newbie trial, his own strength had improved a lot. However, the source of this strength mainly relied on external objects. If it weren't for the fusion with the rules of the Minecraft world, which gave him some magical operational abilities during the previous month, Liang Yue would have been considered to have just exercised his body. Liang Yue's strength: 12 agility, 12 constitution, 16 intelligence, 18 bloodline, human, sealed, talent, vigorous, affinity technique, none skills, language proficiency, ricochet, condition not met, not activated, abilities, simple tool making, Minecraft game character. After a newbie trial, Liang Yue's character attributes were still so simple. He finally managed to get an attack skill through a lottery bonus, but he couldn't use it because he didn't have magic power in his body. Looking at the content in the parentheses, Liang Yue couldn't help but feel a stomach ache again. However, even a simple panel couldn't prevent him from seeing his progress over the past month. Agility has increased a bit, constitution has also increased a bit, and strength has increased by a full 4 points. Not bad. Looking at his strength attribute, which had invisibly kept pace with agility, Liang Yue felt a sense of satisfaction. He subconsciously touched his bulging arms and hard as iron chest and abdominal muscles, and was immediately filled with satisfaction. This should be related to my long hours of mining and quarrying later. Sure enough. As long as you are willing to put in the effort, there will always be rewards. But staring at the panel in front of him, Liang Yue quickly fell into contemplation when he thought of the second hunting trial in a month. As far as the current stage is concerned, whether it is cultivating martial arts, magic, or supernatural powers, it is still too far away for me. Even if I am lucky enough to get such things from the mall, it probably won't amount to much in a short period of time. But just in case, I have to improve my strength before the next trial starts. Cultivation techniques and supernatural powers are out of the question. So the only thing left is to start with external objects. Modern firearms? That's a possibility, but I'm just a 16-year-old exchange student. Buying guns through formal channels is too troublesome and easily attracts attention. It seems I can only find a way to do it secretly. Go to the legendary Hell's Kitchen and play Black Eats Black. I'm not black. Besides, I don't know the situation in Hell's Kitchen. Going there rashly to inquire about these things is probably more conspicuous than buying a gun. Ask Aunt Liu for help? Might as well just steal it, so convenient. Night. After a whole day of observation, Liang Yue finally determined his target for this operation. It was a man who had been selected by many New York residents as one of the most greedy private shop owners in Brooklyn, and coincidentally, this unremarkable Northern Irish fatty ran a gun shop when he was at home during the day. Liang Yue had carefully compared and weighed the options, and ultimately ruled out plans to steal from large targets such as police stations and National Guard residences. First, it is somewhat dangerous to attack such public sector departments, and second, the terrain is relatively complex, although he himself can easily tunnel into these departments from underground due to the Minecraft law. How to accurately find their armor is a significant problem. Can't try it bit by bit, right? At that time, what if he dug into a sewer? On the contrary, as a private gun shop, although its own weapon storage is not as large as the previous two government departments, it is at least easy to handle. Moreover, there is almost no danger after nightfall. Liang Yue, who was sitting in a Golden Arches restaurant opposite the gun shop, eating a late-night snack and drinking milk tea, personally watched the shop owner lock the shop door and then arrogantly ride away on his black Yamaha VMAX in order to better confirm the situation in the store. Liang Yue spent a lot of time wandering around the neighborhood during the day while measuring the layout of the store. He also visited several fruit stores, seed specialty stores, and even some flower and plant shops of the same specifications in the surrounding area. Even the location for the operation had been found in advance. It was an alley with aging facilities, Next to an old car repair shop and a flea market, the straight line distance from the gun shop was no more than 100 meters. The reason for choosing to do it there was because the surveillance cameras had long been out of repair and could not work normally. Moreover, a nearby house seemed to be under construction and reconstruction due to a fire, and the surrounding area was a mess after nightfall. It was even less likely that anyone would stay there to work overtime in the dark. Chapter 17. This neighbor is unusual. Events prove that Liang Yue's choice was indeed correct. As a less affluent working-class neighborhood, police patrols were rare after nightfall, and after successfully sneaking underground, it seemed even more impossible to find him in less than 10 minutes. Liang Yue had completed the entire operation and, on the way back, even repaired the underground passage. After returning to the surface, he even had the leisure to leisurely stroll through New York's night market, and it wasn't until after 10 o'clock in the evening that he took the subway back to the vicinity of his residence. During the process, a few black eyes stared at him meaningfully for a while, but in the end, the two sides parted ways peacefully. Carrying a full storage space of arms, he arrived at his own base in the McWorld, where night had also fallen, and a crescent moon was hanging high on the mountain peak. But unlike the simple conditions at that time, Liang Yue had already managed his stronghold in this world as solid as an iron bucket under the night. Surrounded by mountains, the entire base was brightly lit, and rows of streetlights filled with torches densely covered the surroundings. The firelight illuminated the entire basin, eventually extending to the very top of the mountains. At a glance, there were no dark corners or blind spots anywhere, let alone monsters. Liang Yue had long been accustomed to this scene. He quickly arrived at the basement, which was also brightly lit, put the loot into the storage box, and after some picking and choosing he couldn't wait to set up a target on the wall, randomly grabbed a handgun of unknown model from a pile of guns, and began the simplest target practice. Biu, biu biu. Pa. Papa, biu pa, biu pa, biu biu pa. The feeling of shooting is completely different from a hand crossbow, a little awkward, probably because I'm not used to it yet. After blasting at the target continuously for more than a minute, Liang Yue stopped somewhat reluctantly after using up 10 magazines in a row. As someone who had been using a hand crossbow for self-protection for a month, but failed to leave a corresponding skill in his attribute bar, Liang Yue didn't really have much confidence in his shooting talent. But looking at the paper target more than 30 meters away, which was already covered with dense bullet holes and smashed into a pile of tiny pieces at this moment, in his heart, there suddenly arose an absurd feeling that it was not so. The system misled me. The system misled me. The culprit is probably the hand crossbow without an accurate trajectory, right? It seems that ability is not something that can be developed by shooting a lot of times or killing a lot of enemies. At most it can only train your courage. I need a detailed training plan. Start with target practice, then set a small goal, and strive to hit within 9 rings with every shot. Then forget it. Don't be too ambitious. Let's just do this for now. But in the face of his strong interest, this seemingly boring target practice became very enjoyable. It wasn't until Liang Yue realized that his concentration had begun to decline and his eyes were a little erratic that he had to stop and silently go to bed to rest. When he returned to the real world again, it was already the afternoon of the next day. Life, after all, goes on. Everything in the McWorld, although beautiful, is not all of Liang Yue's life at this time. He was carrying a large fruit basket containing 5 or 6 red apples and a huge watermelon, walking towards his neighbor's house. When first arriving in a new place, especially for someone like Liang Yue who has been sent to a foreign country as an exchange student, harmonious neighborly relations are particularly important. Although he never expects his neighbors to give him any help, at least they won't look at each other coldly during normal interactions, and that's enough. In fact, in the first week of arriving in New York, Aunt Liu had taken him to visit the surrounding neighbors, and naturally, she would also bring a gift. For example, a mid-range bottle of red wine or something. The neighbor Liang Yue was about to visit seemed a bit special, because for the past week or so, the other party seemed to have been away from home, going to the door many times but being turned away made him a little curious about the neighbor's profession. I guess it should be a beauty, so that I can live up to my sincerity of visiting 3 times. Looking at the sky blue, feminine car parked on the street in front of the other party's door, Liang Yue couldn't help but think ding dong. He pressed the doorbell outside the fence gate, and after a while, a slender figure appeared behind the translucent glass door. Then the door was opened from the inside, and a woman wearing a black tight leather suit appeared in his sight. This was an Asian female face. Looking at the other party's mature and somewhat resolute beautiful face, Liang Yue was almost able to judge the other party's identity at the first moment. With a burst of astonishment in his heart, Wen Mingna? Oh no, this is Agent Mei from S.H.I.E.L.D., It really is. What I fear comes true. May I ask who you are? This famous Chinese face in her previous life now had a hint of fatigue on her face. The other party first glanced at the fruit basket in Liang Yue's hand, and then a few smiles appeared on her slightly scrutinizing face as she asked, I'm the new neighbor next door. I came to visit a few times before, but unfortunately, no one was home. Although Liang Yue felt a little helpless at this time, sighing at the impermanence of the world, he still replied with a somewhat awkward smile on his face. Agent May smiled lightly upon hearing this, then folded her arms and turned to shout into the house, Kelson, your new neighbor is here to visit you. Come in. About 5 minutes later, Liang Yue ended this visit, waved goodbye to his slightly balding neighbor, and walked towards his home with some heavy thoughts. It really is. I'm so unlucky. Your neighbor doesn't seem simple either at this time. Agent May leaned lazily against the window sill, holding a half-eaten apple in her hand, and said meaningfully as she watched Liang Yue's leaving figure. Chapter 18. School starts. Shouldn't be, Kelson said, subconsciously touching his hairline as he looked at his partner's expression, then denied it. When I was at the office, I already investigated this new neighbor. He's just an ordinary Chinese exchange student. But a female relative of his in New York is more worthy of our attention. That lady is engaged in some foreign trade work and also owns a large private hospital. She seems to have some cooperation with their logistics medical department. A strong and coordinated body, with a hint of vigilance in his determined eyes. It's easy to see from some subconscious movements that he has faced something before. More importantly, this young man has a wild temperament that doesn't match his age. Agent May ignored her partner's intelligence. Her professional qualities developed over the years have already given her her own set of judging criteria compared to the intelligence on paper. She trusts her feelings more. After speaking, this lady gently lifted it up and took the fruit basket, filled with McSpecial big apples and watermelons, into her hand, and turned to walk out the door. Hey, that's the young man's gift to me, Kelson immediately reminded him. Upon seeing this, then, a big red apple was thrown over. The lady herself continued to hum a little tune and walked out the door. Then she deftly got into the car, started the fire, waved to her partner at the door, and disappeared into the end of the street in a puff of smoke. Kelson felt a little helpless and puzzled looking at the tempting red apple in his hand. He subconsciously took a bite. The sweet juice flowed down his throat into his body, and a fresh taste instantly occupied the middle-aged man's entire body and mind, and an unusually refreshing feeling poured into every part of his body. As a veteran agent, he was a little intoxicated and oblivious for a while. After a long while, Kelson came back to his senses, feeling a little dazed, but also understanding what his partner meant. 2 weeks passed in a flash. During this period, Liang Yue was still living his little life in an orderly manner. He went out for a stroll during the day, gradually familiarizing himself with the surrounding area, and at night he would directly enter the McWorld and continue his marksmanship training plan. As for his neighbor, Kelson did not come to trouble him after Liang Yue sent out a batch of McSpecialty fruits on that day due to a miscalculation. It seems he overestimated the value of these fruits. However, on the third day afterwards, this blonde agent also sent him a baseball with the autograph of a certain star player. As a return gift, Liang Yue himself is not familiar with the sport known as the national sport of the United States, so he naturally doesn't understand the meaning of the ball itself. However, out of respect for this shield agent and neighbor, Liang Yue also specially made a glass cover and placed the baseball in a conspicuous place in the living room. 2 weeks, that is, a full 14 natural days, have passed in addition to the previous 2 days. At this time, 5 new products have been successively refreshed in Liang Yue's system. While, however, it is true that the old saying goes, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. The 5 newly appeared products, for him now, although it can't be said that they are completely useless, they are not far from it. In the short term, Sapphire contains a trace of ice magic inside. From the world of Don't Starve, the selling price is 100 points. Big Meat can immediately replenish 50 points of health after eating. From the world of Castlevania, the selling price is 100 points. Advanced Watering can improve irrigation efficiency, allowing you to water 4 pots of plants at the same time. From the world of Plants vs. Zombies, the selling price is 100 points. Hemostatic Herb, apply to the wound to immediately restore 100 points of health. From the world of Chinese Paladin 3, the selling price is 150 points. Handsome Cowboy Hat, decorative item. From the world of Red Dead Redemption, the selling price is 100 points. From this product refresh, Liang Yue has initially realized some of the rules. For example, the products with 100 points seem to be the lowest level items. He worked hard for a month and only got 500 points in the end. He was really poor. Among these 5 products, first of all, Cowboy hats and watering cans are definitely the most useless things, and probably no fool would buy them. Big meat and hemostatic herbs can both restore health, and they seem to be of great use in an emergency. But don't forget that for Liang Yue, who has the ability of an mid-game character, as long as the satiety is full, health can be automatically restored, and the recovery speed seems to be not slow. So in this way, these two health-returning products have become a rib to him to a certain extent. On the contrary, the sapphire from the world of Don't Starve has become a product that he is not easy to make up his mind about. First of all, this gemstone is obviously not an ordinary decoration, but a material containing ice attribute magic, which can be used to make ice magic wands, or ice amulets, etc. in the game. In other words, this is also a valuable magic material, and it contains magic itself. Therefore, for Liang Yue, who is eager to seek information in this area in order to unlock the ricochet skill as soon as possible, it has an unspeakable temptation. So, almost as soon as this product was refreshed, it aroused his interest, and after thinking about it for a while, Liang Yue finally spent 100 points to buy it. In this way, there are now 3 permanent products in the system: Mall, Sapphire, Hop Seeds, and the crossbow that he drew from the weapon jar before. In this way, the originally empty Mall counter can be considered to have a scale now. The 4th product is already in the works, but Liang Yue may not be able to take care of it for the time being because in the past few days, he has completed the relevant enrollment procedures under the leadership of Aunt Liu. Now, Liang Yue is facing the morning sun and sitting on a bus to school. The cowhide bag behind him is no longer a survival tool, but is full of textbooks and stationery. But to be honest, although going to school is indeed Liang Yue's main purpose in coming to New York, but after a month of training in the novice world, he has begun to feel a little unaccustomed to it at this time. I don't know what the meaning of going to school is to me now. Not to mention the rare treasures in the heavens and worlds. Even if you only look at the materials in the MIG world, it's enough for me to spend my whole life. Right, gold, diamonds, etc. are not counted for the time being, even if it's just reselling some precious wood. Hey, yellow-skinned monkey. Who are you? I don't seem to have seen you on this car. Just as Liang Yue was sitting at the back of the school bus, leaning against the windowsill and slowly dozing off, a sudden voice came from the side. The obviously discriminatory adjective immediately made his eyes narrow, and he glanced slightly at the owner of the voice. Chapter 19 Weird International Class. The high school Liang Yue was going to attend was a public school located next to Brooklyn College of the State University of New York, not too far from where he lived. Generally speaking, the teaching quality of public schools in the United States is mostly subpar because they are public institutions. They enroll a wide range of common people and rarely charge any tuition or miscellaneous fees. Therefore, the hardware and software conditions of these campuses mostly rely on local finances and small social donations. Whether in terms of teaching staff or campus environment, they naturally cannot compare with private schools that charge expensive fees. However, there are always exceptions. For example, the high school Liang Yue was attending, although it is also a public school, because it is located in New York, an internationally leading metropolis, it naturally has many advantages that its peers cannot match, not to mention the massive tax revenue from the city itself, which provides the education department with abundant financial allocations, but also the capital tycoons and financial oligarchs in the city every year. They also make large amounts of targeted donations to establish brand culture and create the image of charitable entrepreneurs. Under these favorable conditions, public schools in New York City naturally live a more comfortable life and have abundant resources to increase teacher salaries and improve various hardware facilities. In addition, even in the so-called democratic America, the main body of social citizens is mostly composed of the vast common people, and even the poor. As a public education resource that enrolls students from all over society, there is a massive source of students every year. The so-called great waves wash away the sand, and those who sink are gold over time. Several public campuses that rank among the best in the entire American education system were born in this way. The reason why Liang Yue came to this high school as an exchange student is probably because the management of this high school wants to continue to expand their influence in the world. Under such a background premise, the high school campus he had previously attended, which had long occupied the top 3 in the province, very coincidentally obtained an exchange student quota. But even so, Liang Yue still couldn't understand how this quota fell on him in that campus with more than 2,000 students, because he really couldn't figure out how a child from a single-parent family, whose mother just opened a small supermarket near their school, earning some extra snack money on weekdays, could compared with other peers. He is at most a little better looking. Could it be Aunt Liu who connected me? Liang Yue, who was slowly getting off the school bus, suddenly felt a burst of Fluxin, vexation, and incomprehension in his heart. Familiar with the Marvel plot, he naturally knew that New York was a powder keg, and the danger was too high. If you can stay away, don't try to get close. But fortunately, the plot has just begun. This exchange student thing is only a year or two at most, and there are still opportunities to run back. Thinking of this, Liang Yue could only sigh helplessly, looked up at the bustling campus scene in front of him, and stepped into the crowd of his peers. In behind him, on the school bus he had taken before, several high school students who seemed to be tall and strong, with well-developed muscles, were poking their heads out of the window, looking around. At this moment, each of them had bruises on their faces, and their expressions still carried a bit of tension and resentment. They kept watching Liang Yue's figure until he disappeared, and then, under the driver's teasing and contemptuous gaze, they got off the school bus. After looking at each other a few times, they walked into the teaching building with great tacit understanding, heads lowered. At this time, it was the busy period of the summer vacation, and the flow of people on campus was relatively mixed. An Asian face like Liang Yue's was not conspicuous among these high school students, although after more than a month of training, his height has rapidly increased from the original 1.75 meters to 1.81 meters. From the perspective of Asian aesthetics, he is definitely a handsome young man above the standard line, not to mention that he has a prince face. A closer look will reveal that his temperament is also very special compared to the people around him, with a bit of aloofness. After all, he has lived 2 lives, and with the blessing of the system. Liang Yue's view of the world and values has already changed quietly. As the saying goes, appearance is born from the heart, and the temperament is even more so. He quietly came to his classroom, and while the students hadn't arrived yet, he chose an inconspicuous seat and sat down. Liang Yue had already heard that there were no fixed classrooms in American high schools, and you needed to follow the subject teacher. Fortunately, in the previous few days, when Aunt Liu took him to complete the admission handover, the campus had already helped him arrange the courses. Otherwise, being unfamiliar with the place, he would probably be very uncomfortable. In addition, when carrying out the student status handover, Liang Yue also discovered that he didn't seem to be the only exchange student at this school. In addition to a large number of students from other city campuses in the United States, there also seemed to be many places from Europe, Japan, South Korea, the Middle East, and Maoshuang, Russia. In addition, in other provinces of China, there also seemed to be some peers who were selected like him. I really don't know what those people are thinking. World people unite? It's just a high school, can it shoulder such a mission? Liang Yue was nestled in the corner by the window at this time, constantly observing the figures walking into the classroom outside the door, and the more he looked, the more he felt something was wrong. Korean, Japanese, Russian girls, Bohemian goddesses, Middle Eastern women with only 2 eyes exposed all over their bodies, Indian bald men exuding the smell of a curry. Could this really be an international class? Hey, hello. I'm Sam Witwicky. Are you a new transfer student too? Just as Liang Yue was lost in thought, a slightly excited voice suddenly came from behind him. The other party deliberately lowered his voice at this moment, appearing a bit sneaky. Sam Witwicky. As soon as he heard this name, Liang Yue's heart boomed, like a thunderbolt exploding, and he immediately felt a little dizzy, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled up in a wry smile. It seems that his previous judgment was wrong, and it was also quite outrageous. The world in front of him not only has Marvel, but at least also has a Transformers. Now it's good. The whole earth seems to be growing on the body of the primordial heavenly lord. And there's no way to avoid it. Chapter 20. Sam and P. Parker. Hello, my name is Liang Yue. Looking at Sam, who was lying on the table behind him, constantly peeking at the girls in the class, Liang Yue could only sigh inwardly and helplessly accept his fate. Liang Yue? Dude, your name is really special. Are you Chinese? I know your names all have the surname in front, right? Yes, but I'm Chinese. I'm here as an exchange student this time. Wow, that's so cool. China, I know it. Bruce Lee is my idol. Can you do kung fu? Liang. As he spoke, Sam suddenly became excited for some reason, waving his hands in front of him, and finally imitating Bruce Lee by scratching his nose. Oh, that's such a pity. Hey, hello. I'm Peter Parker from Queens next door. I'm Sam Witwicky. From Los Angeles. Liang Yue, from China. Looking at the man in front of him who suddenly sat down next to him, who looked like Tom Holland, Liang Yue's originally speechless heart suddenly felt a little overwhelmed, and he subconsciously looked around, scanning the classroom back and forth, trying to find the other protagonists who might exist who would have thought that the 2 idiots who had just gotten together and seemed to hit it off so well were now looking at Liang Yue in unison, with a lewd expression on their faces that everyone understood. How is it, Buddy, which girl in our class have you taken a fancy to? I didn't look at any girls. I was just observing if there were any acquaintances in the classroom. Facing the two people behind him, Liang Yue suddenly felt a little toothache, so he quickly reached into the bag under the drawer, took out 2 big red apples and handed them over, trying to shut them up with food. Thank you, Liang. Thanks. Delicious. This apple, wow, amazing. It's just amazing. I've never eaten such a delicious fruit. I just felt like my spirit has been sublimated. Yes, buddy. That feeling is so cool. My body is a little numb. This fruit must be very expensive. Liang, I guess this must be a secret fruit from your Eastern world. After eating it, can I have the legendary internal strength? Is there really such a magical fruit? This is so cool. Liang Yue, a beauty is coming in. Where? Wow, really a beauty. I really want to get to know her, Sam said after hearing this, looking at the door of the classroom, with a boastful look. In fact, Liang Yue, who was familiar with the plot of Transformers 123, knew very well that Sam was just a melon skin. Don't look at how happy he was shouting now, but he was actually just taking advantage of it verbally. If he really went to talk to a strange beauty, he would immediately shrink back at least 90% of the time, and the other 10% would probably take the opportunity to sneak away to pee. On the other hand, Peter Parker, after seeing the woman at the door, the talkative look on his face, which was still full of excitement, suddenly subsided a lot, but his eyes were still staring at the other person unconsciously. His face also showed a complex expression mixed with surprise and timidity. Seeing this, Liang Yue naturally felt a little strange, so he turned his head and glanced at the beauty again, only to feel that the other person's big eyes and golden hair seemed a little familiar, so he asked, "What's wrong, Peter? Do you know that beauty?" Sam next to him also looked over at this time, looking very interested. Well, she was my classmate in Queens before, named Gwen Stacy. Her father is the chief of the New York Police Department. I didn't expect her to transfer to Brooklyn this time. Seeming to realize that the other party had noticed his gaze, Tom Holland quickly lowered his head at this time, coughed lightly, and lowered his voice to speak. Oh, no wonder. Hey Peter, you must have taken a fancy to that beauty, right? Then hurry up and confess, otherwise I guarantee that she will be someone else's in a few days. Sam was instigating next to him at this time, as if he didn't think it was a big deal. She's not that kind of person. That's not necessarily true. Let me tell you. Ignoring the whispers of the two people behind him, Liang Yue's mind was a little confused at this time because of Tom Holland's introduction before. He naturally already knew the true identity of the blonde beauty, but this was obviously inconsistent with his previous judgment. According to my understanding of the plot, the first Spider-Man likes Mary Jane, that ugly BTCH. This is obviously not. The second one was with Gwen Stacy, and he even killed her father and daughter in the end. As for the third generation, Tom Holland, should he have had a crush on a black mixed-race chick at first, and then transferred his love to a detective girl? That's not right. The time doesn't match a bit. Subconsciously scratching his head, Liang Yue then thought of Tony Stark, who had just been kidnapped in the Middle East half a month ago. If this Iron Man is regarded as the starting point of the plot, then Peter Parker behind him must not be Tom Holland, because the age is too inconsistent. You must know that during Captain America 3, Tony Stark and Tom Holland were only involved together. At that time, Peter Parker had just started high school not long ago. Now Captain America is still frozen in the Arctic, and there are obviously still several years before the Civil War. Then, looking at it this way, the one behind should be the second generation. Thinking of this, Liang Yue looked back at the tender Peter Parker behind him. Looking at it this way, the age matches, but this appearance is still too Holland. On the first day of school, the school teachers obviously didn't want to engage in any in-depth teaching courses. Self-introduction and mutual understanding were the themes of today. The morning time ended in the whispering and noisy atmosphere of the students in the class. At noon, the three came to the school cafeteria. Sam and Tom Holland went to the window to get food, while Liang Yue had already prepared lunch last night, and had been keeping it in the storage space, relying on the infinite shelf life of food that is unique to the McWorld. When he took out his large lunchbox from the disguised backpack, he realized even though a whole day had passed, he seemed to be able to eat something hot at this time. Hey Liang, your lunch seems to be very rich. Is it Chinese food? The two food-getting teams quickly returned together. Looking at the red and prosperous lunch in front of Liang Yue, Sam, who was holding a bag of French fries, a hamburger, and a glass of milk, subconsciously swallowed and asked Liang, "Is your appetite that big?" Tom Holland next to him was not much better at this time, sniffing with his nose. "I'm currently in a period of rapid development. I've grown 6 centimeters in the past month, so I need to eat more. You can join me too. Don't be polite looking at the two people sitting opposite him who are almost drooling like dogs. Liang Yue spread his hands helplessly at them to indicate, wow, I knew you were the best. Liang, then I won't be polite either. I seem to be getting taller recently. Chapter 21 Rabbit Detective Hat. What's this, Liang? Braised pork and this fish. Its shape seems a bit unique, like a squirrel. Yes. That's it. I think I've had this kind of beef at a Chinese restaurant before, but they definitely didn't make it as well as you, Liang. This is potato stewed with beef. It probably tastes good because I use better ingredients. Wow, how is this chicken made? It's a bit oily, but the taste is absolutely amazing. Texas grilled chicken. What? Does Texas have such delicious cooking? Shandong does. How? By the way, Liang, are you planning to live on campus? No, my home is in Brooklyn, and it's only a little over a 15-minute drive from school. Liang Yue, who is holding a large piece of soft-baked beef pie and taking a bite with a potato, replied without thinking after hearing Peter Parker's words, although he wasn't quite sure yet why his mother had such a well-located house in New York. But since he had this kind of condition, why would he want to squeeze into a dormitory with other people? Moreover, both the McWorld, which served as a base, and the upcoming journey through the heavens, needed such an independent and private place. Therefore, in order to better protect his privacy, Liang Yue had even dug out a more private space in the basement of his home. A few days ago, can we come to your house to play later? Sam finally raised his head from the delicious food, looking at him with anticipation. Of course, no problem. How about this afternoon? Liang Yue replied happily upon seeing this afternoon seems like we can't. We still have to join clubs after school later. Holland reminded him from the side. Oh right, we still have club matters to take care of later. Then how about this weekend? Everyone should have time then, right? No problem, of course, we have time. By the way, have you guys thought about which clubs to join? I heard the football team here is very strong. Not interested. I did some research when I came from Queens. I heard the biology club at this high school seems very professional. I want to try it out. What about you, Liang? See if there are any shooting or archery clubs. If not, I'll look for martial arts clubs. Wow. You two have such clear goals? Looks like I also. In the end, when the three reunited after school in the afternoon, they had already joined a small group in this high school. However, apart from Liang Yue fulfilling his promise and successfully entering an unpopular group called the Swordsmanship Club, Sam, on the other hand, failed to meet the physical requirements and almost suffered a concussion from being hit by a regular member during the first round of testing for the football team. Therefore, realizing that he wasn't cut out for it, he could only settle for second best. Under the recommendation of his roommate, he joined a small organization under the Computer Technology Research Club that was responsible for website operation. As for Holland, he accidentally walked into a literature reading group in the end because the biology club had too high requirements. Soon, 2 days passed quickly. During these 2 days of campus life, Liang Yue had finally slowly integrated into the class. However, compared to the strict and orderly teaching atmosphere in China, the United States is really too relaxed. Not only in the teaching atmosphere, but even the academic content in the classroom is much simpler than in China. This difference made Liang Yue a little uncomfortable in China. He had already been accustomed to being a top student and striving to get ahead. Now that he was in high school, his grades had steadily improved a lot. He directly jumped from the top 20 in his class in his original Chinese school to the 8th in the grade here. Almost all of those ahead of him were transfer students from China, but Liang Yue himself was very clear about the quality of this improvement. But now the overall environment is like this, and he couldn't do anything about it for the time being. Rabbit Scout Hat. From a certain mod character in the Don't Starve world, it has certain defense, warmth, and acceleration effects, and can be upgraded. The selling price is 300 points. Good stuff. If I remember correctly, just from the acceleration effect, as long as you wear this hat, you can immediately increase your speed by 10% if it is upgraded to the maximum level. With the state fully open, it can increase the speed by 70%. 300 points is very worthwhile, and the upgrade only requires stone or ortisk. Looking at this hat that had just been refreshed in the system mall, Liang Yue was naturally very satisfied, secretly sighing that the system had finally had a moment of conscience. Looking at his remaining 300 points, Liang Yue didn't hesitate and directly clicked on the purchase button. The 300 points immediately turned to 0, replaced by a hat with 2 long rabbit ears, exquisite workmanship, and a pair of crystal-like goggles below, which was very cute and, appearing in his storage space. How am I supposed to wear this out? Looking at the soft and warm head in his hand, Liang Yue came to the full-length mirror and gently put it on his head in an instant. A warm feeling began to spread down from the top of his head soon. His whole body began to become warm. This feeling was as if after putting on this hat, his whole body would be covered with an invisible layer of warmth, insulation, invisible and intangible, but it really exists. Of course, with Liang Yue's understanding of this hat and the game it was in, he naturally knew that this warmth effect had a limit as long as you stand in the cold wind for a while. After the surrounding temperature drops, this warmth effect will continue to weaken. The role of this hat is, at best, equivalent to a set of invisible thermal underwear. However, this is only the warmth attribute of this Rabbit Scout hat. If you add its own defense and acceleration effects, the effect will have to be recalculated. At this time, although Liang Yue couldn't wait to enter the McBase world immediately to study the specific function of this hat and upgrade it, but time waits for no one. It was already time to go to school, so he could only be patient and temporarily put the Rabbit Scout hat back into his storage space. When school is over in the afternoon, I'll study it carefully. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Canteen Storm. The morning classes ended quickly. Although Liang Yue was a little distracted during class because he was preoccupied, he still successfully completed the tasks. Arriving at the cafeteria again, the group eating was no longer just the three of them. Liang Yue, Sam, and Holland had each gathered several familiar partners around them. Holland brought several men and women, mainly from the book club he had joined. Liang Yue found the face of one of the chubby Chinese Americans familiar. Sam didn't bring many people, just one of his roommates, who looked a bit neurotic and lecherous. They probably had similar tastes. The girl who came to eat with Liang Yue was named Elizabeth James. Her light golden hair was tied behind her head, and she had a fit and well-proportioned figure. She even looked a bit like Barbara Palvin and was also a close combat enthusiast. A few days ago, when Liang Yue joined the swordsmanship club and was being tested, this girl happened to be visiting from the mixed martial arts club next door. When she discovered that he had passed the test with an excellent result, she seemed to develop a strong interest in Liang Yue and immediately asked to spar with him. Faced with a challenge from such a youthful, energetic, and beautiful girl, Liang Yue was a little reluctant to hurt her, but after her repeated provocations, he finally agreed. The whole sparring process was very short. Basically, after the two of them stood facing each other on the sports mat for a while, the girl thought she had caught Liang Yue off guard during a turn. Then, she suddenly pounced like a cheetah, arching her back, opening her arms, and lunging towards his waist and abdomen. At that time, Liang Yue understood that the girl's posture was intended to compensate for her lack of strength by using close entanglement and human locking techniques. In his previous life, Liang Yue had seen a video online of a couple sparring at a party, surrounded by cheering people. The man was a young guy who looked obviously embarrassed to attack the girl, while the girl went all out, looking like a serious expert. In the end, the girl in the video successfully used a cross-arm lock to pin the young man to the ground. Liang Yue didn't expect that he would have the opportunity to face such a situation in this life. In a word, the dilemma Liang Yue faced at the time was that winning was not honorable, but losing was even more embarrassing. Therefore, based on the principle of not being too embarrassed and becoming a laughingstock, seeing the girl pouncing towards him, Liang Yue opportunely kicked out a foot with a bang. The sole of his foot accurately hit the other party's chin. Then, this blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful girl with a hint of elegance collapsed backward. She lay there in a duck-sitting position, unable to wake up for a long time. This was the result of Liang Yue not daring to use his full strength, but to his surprise, this girl, who was KO'd with one kick, didn't blame him afterward. Instead, they became friends. "Hey buddy, your food looks pretty good. How about I add some seasoning for you?" Obviously, they were here to make trouble. Looking closely, one of the fat guys with a face full of looked a bit familiar. He seemed to have been beaten by him on the school bus before. "What's wrong? Squinting eyes? Not satisfied with my seasoning?" The leading man had short golden hair, bulging muscles all over his body, and was at least 1.9 meters tall. He was staring at Liang Yue condescendingly with a pair of eyes, looking threatening and provocative. The originally noisy cafeteria quickly quieted down, and the surrounding students cast their gazes over. Feeling the gazes of the crowd, the short-haired man seemed particularly enjoying it, with a smug smile on his lips. He bent down directly and stared at him face to face. It was at this moment that Liang Yue made his move almost without warning. He silently and quickly stretched out a palm, and with a forceful pinch of his 5 fingers, he suddenly grabbed the neck of this leading young man. His slender knuckles almost completely sank into the other party's throat, causing the other party's body to suddenly soften in an instant. Then, Liang Yue pulled down hard only to hear a bang. The young man's forehead briefly made intimate contact with a metal dining table, and then bounced up high. The strong force directly caused the tableware on the table to bounce up and fall to the ground with a clanging sound. Bang suddenly attacked. And under the influence of dizziness, the originally somewhat dazed man was once again grabbed by Liang Yue's neck and thrown onto the table. Bang. Finally, after the 3rd time, this strong young man couldn't hold on any longer. His head tilted and he lay directly on the ground. On his forehead, an egg-sized lump was rapidly swelling. FX. It wasn't until this time that the 2 followers behind him reacted and rushed up, waving their fists at him, cursing uncleanly in their mouths. Liang Yue had already stood up from his seat at this time. Seeing the 2 people's boxing movements like mad cows, he himself appeared very calm. A pair of eyes faced the other party directly, his expression serious and calm. Without any intention of dodging, his 2 arms were raised high in front of his head, his body swayed left and right as a defensive action, while his footsteps slowly retreated after taking a few punches from the 2 of them. He suddenly delivered a ruthless and dark groin kick. AWW, the fat man with a face full of immediately howled and fell down, subconsciously covering his crotch with both hands. The whole person was like a catfish that had landed on the shore, twisting and twitching non-stop. Seeing this, the fierce aura of the other person next to him was shortened by a section. He was panting heavily, his chest rising and falling, but he was still slowly approaching him. Looking at the other party's cautious appearance, Liang Yue just curled his lips slightly and walked towards the other party unhurriedly. Seeing this, the person on the opposite side swallowed subconsciously, and then stepped back slowly. It's just that he didn't expect at this time that Elizabeth, Sam, Little Spider, and others had quietly approached behind him, then, only to see 3 people, 1 strangling his neck and 2 pulling his arms, and before Liang Yue could make a move, they had directly stuck him there. The lecherous man that Sam brought, at this time, even splashed a box of milk on his face after hesitating for a while. The Chinese American fatty picked up the cola at hand and poured it on him. Seeing this, Liang Yue shook his head with a smile, threw away the chopsticks in his hand, and then unhesitatingly ended the battle with a knee strike to the other party's abdomen. Chapter 23 Mysterious Alchemical Product. A good lunch was ruined by a few people afterward. The tardy campus security took Liang Yue to the principal's office, while the 3 lying on the ground were sent to the campus medical center. After understanding the whole story, the principal didn't make things difficult for him. He just gave him a lecture and let him leave. Apparently, the bald-headed white principal knew that young people of high school age sometimes couldn't control their tempers and would often fight at the slightest disagreement. Therefore, fighting was not uncommon in his school. And keeping the peace was the right way to manage things, especially since Liang Yue insisted that the other party had racial discrimination tendencies and had insulted him with discriminatory remarks. Hey buddy, are you okay? Did the principal give you a hard time? Back in the classroom before afternoon class, Liang Yue had just sat down when Sam and Hollander behind him couldn't wait to ask. Next to Liang Yue, a quiet and delicate Japanese girl named Yamamoto Neko also looked at him curiously. I'm fine. The principal just taught me a few life lessons, Liang Yue said with a smile. I thought the principal would order you to call your parents. Sam said with lingering fear, his face full of apprehension. Perhaps for him, fighting was still too exciting otherwise. In the plot of Transformers 123, this young man wouldn't have behaved so hysterically, but fortunately, as a protagonist, he still has courage. At 2:30 in the afternoon, school was over. After saying goodbye to the others, Liang Yue went to the club activity room. As soon as he opened the door, Elizabeth's slender figure was already waiting there. The girl was currently trying her best to move her hands and feet under the afternoon sun. A comfortable cotton tracksuit showed off her beautiful figure. Speaking of which, ever since he kicked this blonde beauty silly a few days ago, she would occasionally take the opportunity to visit and spar with him. Liang Yue naturally had a good impression of this strong, resilient, and unpretentious beauty, of course mainly because she is a beauty. So, if he was free, he generally wouldn't refuse her invitation. Now the question is what Elizabeth practices is the unrestricted mixed martial arts that has been very popular in the United States in recent years. Things like gouging the eyes, inserting fingers, breaking fingers, monkey steals peaches, and even biting with teeth are all child's play, and nothing is refused. This technique emphasizes that if you can take a tool, you should never go empty-handed, and if you have a knife, don't use a brick. It can be called the best choice for street fights. However, This kind of fighting mode is obviously not suitable for sparring with Elizabeth, so later, Liang Yue had to temporarily put down some of his ideas and became a sparring partner for this girl. It's just that, as a mixed martial art that excels in ground fighting, he would unconsciously get involved at certain times, breaking arms, kicking thighs, and so on. After a close quarters fight, the style of painting would often become a bit strange, just like now. This girl is clamping his waist with her legs, tightly hugging his neck with her hands, pressing him against her chest, trying to subdue him by suffocating him. Okay, if it were placed on an octagon fighting arena. This seems to be a common technique to defeat the enemy, but if you think about it carefully, you will find that this technique has no practical value at all. If he really met someone on the street who was playing ground tactics with him, Liang Yue would definitely pick up a brick and smash him to death in the first time, but now that he is facing a beauty, he certainly can't be so rude. So Liang Yue tickled her armpits with his hands, and all offensives were automatically resolved. So that's how it is. Holding the Rabbit Scout hat in his hand, Liang Yue was sitting in the basement of his base at this time, constantly testing the object in front of him with stones. Cubic stones shrunk into cubes were constantly disappearing from his hands, turning into inconspicuous strands of white light and blending into it. The hat in front of him seemed to be a bottomless pit, refusing no one and accepting everything. It turns out that this Rabbit Scout hat, which also comes from the game world, is not just a simple hat. Its existence is more like a product of magical alchemy. The hat itself also has an invisible groove space every time a cubic stone is integrated. Only some essence fingers that Liang Yue doesn't quite understand are absorbed, and finally only a handful of gray dust remains in this process. This hat will integrate the essence into itself to fill a special rune inside, so as to achieve enhanced defense, warmth, and acceleration effects. In addition, this rune also has a magical self-repair function. When the hat is damaged, it can also be repaired by adding stones. For more than 2 hours, nearly 2,000 cubic rocks were absorbed in this way, and the Rabbit Scout hat in front of him finally reached its limit, level 30. The hat in full level state has not changed in appearance. It is still the cute style. The changes in attributes are not too big, but for the current Liang Yue, it is already his best equipment. Rabbit Scout hat, level 30, acceleration 10/70 when used in full state, warmth, excellent defense 50. After putting it on his head and jumping up and down with great interest for a while, Liang Yue was satisfied and put the hat back into the storage space, and then took a pistol from the armory next to him and began his routine shooting practice in the Assassin Alliance. Under the training of a dedicated person, the protagonist turned from a rookie who knew nothing to a gun expert in just over a week, and he also mastered a unique shooting skill that can turn bullets. Finally, with his own marksmanship and reasonable tactical cooperation, the protagonist even successfully took down the assassin's lair and wiped out this group of assassins. Being able to achieve this kind of style reversal is of course related to the protagonist's own talent and the ethereal luck. However, Liang Yue is confident that his conditions are not bad except for not being able to control the beating of his heart and let himself enter the state of dynamic vision. In this guy's opinion, he seems to be stronger than the male lead in every aspect. After a round of ammunition was fired, 2 magazines in a row were emptied by him on the wooden wall more than 30 meters away. The paper target was still hanging unharmed, only the narrow area within the 9 rings in the middle had been completely shot into. Received 2 magazines. 80% of the bullets hit the 9 rings, and the remaining 20% are in the 10 rings. I can finally make some progress. It's time to hide a moving target. Chapter 24 Shizuka Miracle. Time flies, and another week has passed in the blink of an eye. During this period, the system store has refreshed with many items, some of which made Liang Yue's eyes burn with desire, and he felt the urge to buy them, but it was all useless because he has no points left now. When the clock hand finally ticked the last second at midnight, the light curtain in front of Liang Yue's eyes switched, and those demonic eyes appeared again, just quietly watching him. The first official plane hunting experience is ready. Does the host choose to enter now? Hearing the system's words, Liang Yue subconsciously looked at himself at the moment, a tight-fitting body-shaping suit for morning running, plus gray loose shorts and a t-shirt. On his feet were a pair of high-quality domestic ultra-light black sneakers, comfortable and low-key. Besides that, there was nothing else. Of course, this is only from the surface. After learning the lessons of the previous McWorld teleportation, the really useful things such as necessary food, water, weapons, armor, ammunition, and various materials, etc., had already been packed into his storage space. I'm ready. Start teleporting. Ling. Order confirmed. Randomly selecting experience coordinates, The plane the host will enter this time is High School of the Dead World. The moment he heard the name of this world, Liang Yue was stunned. He only had time to be puzzled when the brightly lit basement in front of him suddenly changed with light and shadow, and his mind suddenly became dizzy. A piece of unfamiliar information appeared out of thin air, flashing quickly in front of his eyes like a movie ding. Identity information loading complete. System task released. Please check by the hosting. Monthly lottery benefits have been refreshed. Please pay attention to the host. Beep emergency notification. Emergency notification. A violent incident of unknown cause has occurred at the school gate. A violent incident of unknown cause is occurring at the school gate. Please student saw. Who are you? No. No. Help. Along with an ear-piercing scream from the school's broadcast loudspeaker, Liang Yue suddenly opened his eyes. Looking around, he found himself lying on a bed covered with white sheets, the air filled with a strong smell of blood and a hint of formalin. Combined with the previous school broadcast preliminary judgment, he should be in the infirmary of Fujimi Academy. A blonde beauty in a white coat was humming a little tune, busying herself leisurely beside him. Even with her hands covered in blood, she still looked calm. However, Liang Yue knew that the reason why this beauty could calmly face the bloody wound was not because of her strong psychological quality or high professional ethics, but because this beauty's personality was a purebred airhead, and the object she was busying with was lying on the hospital bed like himself, his complexion pale, twitching from time to time, looking like he was about to become a zombie. Shizuka Miracle teacher subconsciously knocking on his head that was rapidly clearing up. Liang Yue slowly stood up from the bed and came behind the blonde beauty. A Rishi-kun, you're awake, that's great, quickly help me hold down this classmate, he seems a little unwell, I'll go get a bottle of disinfectant to clean his wound. Saying that, Shizuka Miracle smiled at him gently, unconsciously moving her exaggerated figure towards the window filled with medicine. Ishikazu. It was the character identity that the system loaded into Liang Yue, originally just an ordinary second-year high school student, like most boys in the school, secretly in love with a Shizuka Miracle in front of him. Liang Yue tried hard to search his mind for plot information about this brother, and found that he seemed to be just a minor character who died at the beginning of the manga to protect Shizuka Miracle. Because of his courage, he was recognized by another heroine, Seiko Birsujima, who arrived later, so before his death, he was allowed to say his name in front of Shizuka Miracle. Then, Senpai Seiko also left behind a famous saying, protecting a man's self-esteem is a woman's reserve. However, identity is ultimately just a disguise arranged for him by the system. Originally, this Ishikazu was just an unremarkable bookworm, a four-eyed kid. Now that he has been replaced by Liang Yue, it can be said that besides this name, his entire person has disappeared from this world. And advance in Liang Yue is still that Liang Yue, but in the consciousness of others, he has naturally become Ishikazu. In addition, the sportswear he was originally wearing has now been replaced with a Japanese school uniform. Miracle-sensei, you should quickly pack your things. You also heard the school broadcast just now. The school is very chaotic now. It seems something has happened. We may need to evacuate later. Looking at the figure on the hospital bed, struggling to get up like a convulsion, Liang Yue subconsciously turned his hand over, and a standard McWorld iron sword was immediately held in his hand. But that classmate's situation seems a little bad. Hearing this, Shizuka Miracle's big eyes, full of charm without knowing it, were immediately filled with confusion. It's okay if the situation allows later, I will take him away with me. Seeing this, Liang Yue turned his head helplessly and said to her, since Ishii-kun requested it, then I, the teacher, will do as you say. The originally neat and handsome features became hideous and abnormal at this moment. His mouth opened wide, revealing 2 rows of large white teeth full of saliva. To Liang Yue, swish, before this thing could make any noise, the iron sword in Liang Yue's hand had already been delivered. The thick long sword directly pierced through the zombie's mouth and into the back of its head. The whole process was exceptionally smooth, without any sense of stagnation. Immediately afterwards, a stream of dirty black blood spurted out from the zombie's brain, and Liang Yue, unable to retract his move in time, inevitably got stained with blood. It feels much easier to deal with than the zombies in the McWorld, and the body is not that hard after easily killing the zombie. Liang Yue felt a burst of thoughtfulness in his heart, but thinking about it, it's right, in the original manga, didn't the protagonist and his party kill zombies with metal bats at the beginning? Turning his gaze, looking at Shizuka Miracle behind him at this time, she still seemed completely unaware, humming a pleasant melody, unhurriedly selecting various medicines from the cabinet. Seeing this, Liang Yue couldn't help but laugh, flicking the iron sword in his hand, and the blood beads flew towards the white hospital bed, quietly coming behind the other party. facing the glass window on the side. His body also tightened slightly. If he remembers correctly, the second wave of zombies will break through the window from the corridor outside the glass window later system. I want to draw a lottery. Chapter 25 Birsujimasiko. As Liang Yue's words fell, a dark, large turntable appeared in front of him again, with a red pointer fixed in the middle. Moreover, perhaps the system had considered the situation he was currently facing. The large turntable in front of him was actually in a semi-transparent state. While observing the turntable, Liang Yue could also use it to see the situation outside the window opposite him, albeit somewhat blurred. However, even so, he still didn't dare to be too careless, and after quickly browsing the prizes on the turntable, he issued the command to start anyway. I don't recognize most of the prizes, and I can't decide what I'll get. Looking at the turntable in front of him that had completely blurred in an instant, Liang Yue helplessly comforted himself in his heart. Stop, Ling. Congratulations, host, you have drawn a soul-absorbing bracelet. This item comes from the Animisha world and can be used to discover, absorb, and store the soul power of the dead. It's this thing? I should be able to use it, right? Liang Yue had played the game Animisha in his previous life, and this soul-absorbing bracelet should be an auxiliary item from the third installment. It was once obtained by an ordinary foreign policewoman, and after possessing it, she could absorb the overflowing soul power from the killed monsters in that game. Soul power was roughly divided into 3 types, with red, yellow, and blue colors respectively. Red soul power could be stored and used to strengthen various items, weapons, or armor. Yellow soul power, after being absorbed, could not be stored, but would immediately restore the user's health, while blue soul power could be used to restore magic. Restore magic? I need to have magic first. With a thought, a silver bracelet suddenly appeared in Liang Yue's hand. The material was neither gold nor wood, and the touch felt somewhat like jade. With a hint of warmth, the surface of the bracelet was also engraved with an image of an unknown demon, which looked like a Japanese style in a daze. The moment the soul-absorbing bracelet clasped on his wrist, Liang Yue's eyes suddenly blurred and then distorted for a time. The entire world in front of him seemed to have a sharpening effect added to it, making him very uncomfortable. Fortunately, this situation only lasted for a few seconds before slowly disappearing. Ouch! Just then, Ms. Ju Chuan suddenly cried out in surprise, and a bottle of what seemed to be disinfectant slipped from her hand and shattered on the ground. Clang! The crisp sound of glass breaking immediately attracted the attention of a group of zombies in the corridor. The zombies in the apocalypse world were not very troublesome creatures. First of all, they had no vision, touch, or smell, and could only rely on hearing to track the location of their target. However, after humans mutated into zombies, their strength had been greatly enhanced. Originally, because Liang Yue had acted early, the person on the hospital bed had been silently killed before he could make any noise. The zombies wandering in the corridor would not have noticed them, but now after taking a look at the blonde beauty next to him who was still nonchalantly selecting various medicines, Liang Yue rolled his eyes helplessly. Perfect, I'll use these few zombies to test the quality of this soul-absorbing bracelet. Bang bang crash, under the impact of the zombies, the window on one side of the infirmary shattered into a pile of pieces. After only 3 hits, 8 zombies roared and waved their hands, about to climb in from the corridor. Seeing this, Liang Yue immediately greeted them with the iron sword in his hand, his expression calm with a hint of excitement. Thrust, under the sunlight, the tip of the sword seemed to be wrapped in a bit of cold light, instantly following Liang Yue's strength and piercing into the forehead of a zombie. Left slash, right chop, horizontal cut, downward strike. Taking advantage of the zombies' climb, Liang Yue consecutively slashed several times, carrying a strong force, and directly cracked the skulls of 4 of them before the remaining zombies could get up from the ground. Then, under the fierce pounce of the remaining 3 zombies, he fled and retreated, while continuing to deliver the iron sword in his hand in an orderly manner. Thrust, chop, slash. 3 simple and direct moves in succession successfully eliminated all of the remaining 3 zombies. The whole process lasted only 5 or 6 seconds. After joining the school's kendo club, because Liang Yue had not yet obtained any sword manuals or secret techniques, he could only practice these simplest moves against the target on weekdays. However, precisely because of the simplicity and directness of these moves, the effect achieved in a short period of time was obviously very good. It seemed that these few zombies in front of him could not withstand his hacking and slashing. After killing these few former members of his species, Liang Yue did not relax, but slowly squatted on the ground, looking at the zombies in front of him with a serious expression because at this moment, After these zombies fell, a series of blurred red spheres were slowly floating up from their corpses according to the information from the system before. Liang Yue knew that this should be the soul power left in the bodies of the zombies at this time. These soul powers appeared somewhat weak, like candlelight in the wind, flickering on and off, as if they might be extinguished at any time. Seeing this, Liang Yue no longer hesitated. And with a flip of his wrist, he aimed the soul-absorbing bracelet at these soul powers in an instant. An invisible suction force suddenly emerged from the bracelet. The soul spheres, which were originally floating in the air, immediately seemed to be summoned, carrying streaks of light, and merged into the bracelet one after another. I don't feel anything different. System, what is this bracelet for? Seeing this, Liang Yue pursed his lips speechlessly, and secretly asked the system, please explore on your own. Host, I knew it. Helplessly standing up, looking at Ms. Juchuan next to him, she seemed to have filled her satchel with various medicines, and was standing there with a tangled face. What's wrong, Ms. Shizuka? Not enough medicine. There's enough, it's just a bit heavy. Oh, then leave it to me, thank you. Casually taking the canvas bag from Shizuka Juchuan's hand, with a flick of his sleeve, Liang Yue threw it into the storage space just as he was about to leave with his cute blonde beauty. Who would have thought that? Turning his head, another beauty with long purple hair had already appeared at the door of the infirmary at this moment. This slender woman was looking at him with glowing eyes, as if she had discovered some treasure. Siko-senpai. Seeing this, Liang Yue smiled awkwardly at the other party, knowing the plot of the apocalypse. He naturally knew that although Siko on the opposite side usually had the appearance of a quiet beauty, she was at heart a warmonger with violent tendencies. The desire and pursuit of strength of this kind of person was naturally unimaginable to ordinary people. Oh? So Kouhei already knows me? Let me formally introduce myself. I am a third-year student and captain of the Kendo Club, Siko Byosujima. I'll look forward to your guidance in the future. Second-year Class A, Kazuki Ishii, just an ordinary high school student who fortunately obtained some special abilities. Nice to meet you. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.